5. Trance-control clairvoyance is that psychic state under which the control of the physical body of the medium is assumed by a spirit intelligence, and the consciousness of the medium is, for the time being, dethroned. In this case, the controlling spirit is really the clairvoyant, and simply uses the medium's body as a means of communicating what the spirit sees, and therefore the question of subjective and objective spiritual sight, insofar as the medium is concerned, cannot be raised. To some persons who go to mediums for readings and who may become witnesses in trials at law, it may not be known that under trance control, the medium is to all intents and purposes absent. Therefore, in dealing with definitions of clairvoyance to be used for the enlightenment of thinking people, judges, and juries, it seems necessary for the protection of such mediums to explain what is here termed trance-control clairvoyance. Telepathic clairvoyance, etc. 6. Telepathic clairvoyance is the subjective perception in picture form of thought transmitted from a distance. The type of clairvoyance illustrated in Class 4 is frequently called traveling clairvoyance, because the spirit appears to travel, after leaving its body, and visit distant scenes. According to the above definitions, this type of clairvoyance is classified under definition number 1, but other authorities would give it a separate class by itself. When the psychic's mind seems to travel backward along the stream of time, and remembers events which were beyond its normal recollection, we have cases of so-called retrocognition. When, on the other hand, the psychic's mind seems to travel forward into the future and sees scenes and events which, of course, he was otherwise unable to foretell, we have cases of prevision, prophecy, and precognition. This latter subject will be dealt with more fully in the chapter devoted to prophecy versus fortune-telling. We also have spontaneous and experimental clairvoyance, these definitions explaining themselves. Then direct and indirect clairvoyance. Direct when no other mind or agency is involved but the psychic's own. Indirect when it goes through a roundabout channel and involves some other mind, incarnate or discarnate. As opposed to telepathic clairvoyance, we have so-called independent clairvoyance. Also, there are cases of reciprocal clairvoyance, in which two persons see one another at the same time and, as it were, exchange their clairvoyant visions. The type of clairvoyance which is characterized by leaving the body and visiting the spiritual spheres, afterwards returning to reanimate the body, is called ecstasy. Mr. Ledbetter divides clairvoyance into 3 subdivisions: clairvoyance in time, clairvoyance in space, and direct clairvoyance, in which the astral or spiritual senses are opened up so as to perceive planes of activity now about us. Dream clairvoyance. Clairvoyance may also occur in dreams, crystal visions, etc., and clairaudience, which corresponds to clairvoyance save that the information is obtained by means of the ear rather than the eye, may be obtained through shell hearing. In this case, the messages are heard rather than seen. Another technical name for clairvoyance which is sometimes used is telesthesia. Clairvoyance may manifest itself in a variety of forms, as the above definitions would signify. The most common form is spontaneous clairvoyance, in which the psychic sees pictures of absent persons and scenes. Clairvoyant dreams are fairly common. Clairvoyant diagnosis. There is a type of mental clairvoyance which enables the subject to see, as it were, into the body of another, diagnosing his disease as though he perceived clearly the conditions present in that individual's body at the time. This form of psychic vision was possessed by Andrew Jackson Davis in a remarkable degree, but is possessed by many psychics of our own day. Another form of clairvoyance is that in which underground metals and waters may sometimes be perceived. Usually in this case, the psychic walks over the ground to be explored with a forked twig or stick in his hands. Suddenly this bends or dips, and where this happens, water or metal is to be found. This is technically known as dowsing, and has been proved to exist as a scientific fact by Sir William F. Barrett, Professor of Physics in the University of Dublin. Of late years, a new and peculiar type of clairvoyance has been developed by Mr. Vincent N. Turvey of London, a friend of Mr. W. T. Stead. He termed this phonvoyance, for the reason that he receives his impressions and intuitions, etc., when he is conversing with a distant friend over the telephone, and then only. This is a form of sensitiveness which could be obtained by many psychics if they developed it. The explanation of clairvoyance. Clairvoyance has been explained in a variety of ways. We may briefly summarize these theories as follows. 1. The astral or spiritual sense theory. This may be stated as follows. Corresponding to each physical sense organ, the eye, ear, etc., there is a corresponding spiritual or astral sense organ. We see physical objects by means of the physical eye and hear them by means of the physical ear. When we see clairvoyantly, on the contrary, we see by means of our spiritual eye, and when we hear clairaudiently, we hear by means of the spiritual or astral ear. These spiritual sense organs function in a spiritual world, and of course serve the spiritual body when we die as our physical organs now serve us, and operate on the spirit plane of activity. If their use is not cultivated in precisely the right direction, it may lead to difficulties for the reason that both the astral and spiritual sight may be used at the same time. They may become mixed up and you may see two worlds at once instead of one, so that you cannot be sure when you go outside the door whether you are going to step on the pavement or into a great ditch, both of which you see equally clearly before you. Many persons have got into this condition, which takes some time to outgrow. 2. The spiritual influence theory. According to this theory, clairvoyance is accomplished not by means of the subject's own unaided powers, but always through the instrumentality of a spirit who sees the distant scenes, etc., and impresses them upon the subject's mind telepathically. Tubes, thought forms, and direct perception. 3. The astral tube theory. According to this view, the clairvoyant constructs a sort of telescope or tube for himself out of astral matter, and through this he looks. The figures, in this case, always appear small and far off. 4. By the creation of a thought form. On this theory, we create a thought form for ourselves in the locality we desire to visit, and utilize it for the purpose of observation. We look out of its eyes, hear with its ears, etc. 5. The direct perception theory. This theory says that outside influences play no part in the phenomena, but that we perceive distant scenes ourselves by means of some process of self-projection. But here we are met with a difficulty that if the psychic is absent, viewing the distant scene, how can he also be present in the room, animating his own body and speaking through it as he undoubtedly does in many cases? Most psychics, when they begin their development, see shapes and figures more frequently than they experience any other phenomena. They wonder why this should be. Why should nearly all of us see? Now and then, it is true, we come across one who hears more easily than sees, but he is the exception, not the rule. Why and how we see in clairvoyance. The explanation of this fact is probably the following. We use our eyes more than we do any other one of our senses. We feel that our active consciousness is more connected with sight than with anything else. The sight centers in the brain are more used than any of the others, and this fact is proved by dreams, in which we see figures but very seldom hear spoken words. Again, our memory consists mostly of visual symbols. If we think of a person, we call up his image before us, this being a memory image. Now, as these parts of the mind and brain are so active, it is only an extension of this faculty of inducing memory images which enables us to see objects and figures in clairvoyance. We only have to force this faculty of the mind a little more than usual to carry it beyond the limitations of physical sense. Whereas with the other senses, much less used, we have to do a great deal more of this cultivating or forcing process in order to develop the corresponding spiritual organs. Clairvoyance and similar faculties depend in many cases upon the partial liberation or freeing of the spirit from the body, and the stimulation of the corresponding psychic sense organs into a higher degree of activity, and so permitting their use. The following are a few exercises which will be found helpful in developing this faculty of clairvoyance according to our methods of development. Developing exercises. 1. Seat yourself in a comfortable chair in a semi-darkened room. Mentally construct, i.e. imagine, before you a tube, open at both ends. One end of this tube fits over your eyes, and the other end extends indefinitely outward into space. Imagine that this tube is hollow and that you can see through it perfectly. Turn this tube in the direction of the house of a friend of yours. Mentally go into a room and see if you can discover in it anyone present, and if so, who he is and what he looks like. Note what you see carefully. You will be able to verify the next day how far your vision is correct. 2. Construct the tube as before. At the other end of this tube, which you should imagine about 100 yards long, you must endeavor to see clairvoyantly the face of a friend. Try to distinguish the features of this face, making them clearer and clearer. When you have done this, gradually pull it toward you by an effort of will, until it is only about 2 or 3 feet distant. It should then be perfectly clear and every feature distinguishable. When you have succeeded in visualizing this face so clearly that you see it as distinctly as you would if that individual stood before you in life, your progress as a clairvoyant will have made great advances, and you may then begin experiments in influencing this person at a distance, while seeing his face before you as explained. Will that he should do a certain thing, to think of you at a certain time, or see your face float before him as he is busy with his daily occupations. If you practice this persistently, you will ultimately achieve success, being able to influence persons without doubt. Polarization and how to use it. This ability to influence a distant person or object by means of your will, when directed toward him, has been termed a polarization, because you polarize a path or channel through the astral atmosphere toward the desired point, and this channel facilitates psychic communication in both directions. A great deal depends, during these experiments, upon your ability to hold the object clearly in your mind's eye, and to concentrate upon it. If you do not do this, your efforts will be lost, since you will find there are a great many astral currents, playing to and fro, which tend to disintegrate your own currents set up by you, and unless these are strong, you will not succeed in overcoming the astral cross-currents. In conducting these experiments, you must be sure, especially at first, always to keep your consciousness centered in your own body, and not to let it go outward into space along with your thought. Your will alone must travel outward. You must keep your consciousness within your own physical body. If you do not do this, you will be apt to get into trouble. Your starting point, your focal center, as it is called, must always be maintained. In developing clairvoyance, you should remember that faith and belief tend to open up your latent powers and faculties, while disbelief has the contrary effect of closing them and shutting off all further development. This is true in all lines of psychic unfoldment. Clairvoyance is a faculty possessed by the whole human race in varying degrees, and there are indications that with each generation its power is becoming greater and greater, so that the time will doubtless come when everyone will see clairvoyantly, just as we now see with our ordinary eyes. In fact, the possession of strong intuition and sentiments, sensing the feelings and emotions of others, etc., are but undeveloped clairvoyant flashes, giving you an insight into the mind of the person with whom you are conversing. Factors in the development of clairvoyance. Concentration is an important factor in the cultivation of clairvoyance. You must train your mind so that you can think of a particular object for several minutes without relaxing or allowing any other thought to enter your consciousness. You must practice gazing at an object until you can do this for 2 or 3 minutes without moving your eyes and without fatigue. You should cultivate deep breathing exercises and, during inspiration, think that you are drawing on the vital energy of the universe, while with each breath you exhale, you are throwing off any adverse influences which may have come to you. Visualizing is an important factor in developing clairvoyance. You should get into the habit of calling up before your mind a face you have seen or a scene you have witnessed that day, trying to remember every detail and making it clearer and clearer until you have every detail clear in your mind's eye. You should then endeavor to project it outward into space, as though you were seeing these pictures outside your head as real entities, and not merely as memory pictures. Crystal gazing, etc., will greatly help in this. How to distinguish true from false. One question which always presents itself to the mind of the student is this: how can I distinguish the true from the false, real clairvoyant visions from memory pictures and hallucinations? It is extremely difficult to do this, particularly for the beginner, and this ability to distinguish comes only with prolonged practice and experience. A lady of my acquaintance has all her life been enabled to distinguish between phantasmal figures of the living and those of the dead. That is, she could tell by looking at the figure whether it represented a living or a dead person. Again, she was always able to tell whether this was a genuine or helpful intelligence, or whether it was an evil or lying one. This ability to distinguish cannot be gained in a day. It must come by practice, and the beginnings of genuine clairvoyance can only be ascertained by experiment and by following up on the visions and figures which appear to one, and see whether they lead to anything definite in the way of progress and enlightenment or not. As to the various symbols and colors which appear to the clairvoyant, these should be interpreted according to the rules laid down in chapters 11 and 12, devoted to these subjects. Clairvoyance and dreams will be discussed in the next chapter. A few words in conclusion as to the theory of clairvoyance. It will be remembered that I enumerated before, pages 117 to 124, the various theories which have been advanced to explain clairvoyance, the astral sense theory, the direct vision theory, etc. Our own view of the matter is that all of the explanations previously proposed are in a sense true. That is, they are all true in particular cases, but that none of them explains all types of clairvoyance. The spirit influence theory is true in some instances, the direct clairvoyance theory is true in others, and the astral sense theory is the correct one in still others, etc. The mystery solved. As to the difficulty which is presented by the fact that a clairvoyant can animate and speak through his own body while he is psychically active elsewhere, this is explained by assuming that only a portion of his total psychic self remains behind, and that the more active spirit part performs the journey or excursion, this part being connected to the physical body by means of a cord or connection which unites it to the latter. This connection is sometimes called the silver thread, and is the channel of communication between the spirit and its body, while the former has gone on its excursion. If this thread were to snap or become broken, death would take place, since the spirit would be unable to return and reanimate the body. Such accidents are extremely rare, but they have been recorded from time to time in the past. In clairvoyance, the connection remains, of course, intact, and communication back and forth between the body and the absent psychic self takes place along this cord or thread. In still other types of clairvoyance, on the other hand, no actual excursion or leaving the body takes place. The active consciousness remains in the body, animating it, while the clairvoyant vision takes place through the psychic telescope or tube before mentioned. In such cases, there is no difficulty in accounting for all we see, but this is not such an advanced type of clairvoyance as the former, in which the psychic self leaves the body and goes on trips and excursions of its own. End of Chapter 14. Recording by Jeannie Hall, Eldersburg, Maryland.
Chapter 15 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Recording by Pamela Krantz. Dreams. Dreams usually take place during sleep, though there is a peculiar form of imaginative picturing which may occur sometimes during the waking hours, and which we call daydreaming. Of these I shall treat in another place. Speaking first of ordinary dreams, I may begin by pointing out that before we can understand them we must know a little of the nature and phenomena of sleep in which they occur. We all spend about 1/3 of our lives in sleep, so that this is a condition which we should certainly know something about if we possibly can. What is sleep? Various theories have been advanced in the past to explain sleep. but no satisfactory theory has ever been fully accepted. Thus we have the so-called chemical theories, which endeavor to account for sleep by assuming that certain poisonous substances are formed in the body during waking hours and are eliminated during sleep. Others have suggested that sleep is due to peculiar conditions of the circulation of blood in the brain. Still others that the action of certain glands explains sleep. Others that muscular relaxation accounts for it. Others that the lack of external stimuli is sufficient to induce profound slumber. All of these theories have been shown insufficient to explain the facts. We shall never arrive at a satisfactory theory of sleep, doubtless, until we admit the presence of a vital force and the existence of an individual human spirit, which withdraws more or less completely from the body during the hours of sleep, and derives spiritual invigoration and nourishment during its sojourn in the spiritual world. We shall speak of this more fully presently. The 7 common dreams. For the present we must explain, to begin with, the common types of dreams, and show how they are to be accounted for. There are 7 types of dreams, which, it is said, everybody experiences at one time or another in his life. These are: 1. The falling dream. 2. The flying dream. 3. The dream of inadequate clothing. 4. The dream of not being able to get away from some beast or injurious person or thing that is pursuing. 5. The dream of being drawn irresistibly to some dangerous place. 6. The dream that some darling wish has been gratified. 7. The dream of being about to go on a journey and being unable to get your things into your trunk, etc. Some of these dreams are to be explained in one way, some in another, but broadly speaking it may be said that all ordinary dreams such as the above, or others of a like type, are due to one of 3 causes: 1. Physical stimuli. 2. Subconscious mental association. 3. Subconscious imagination. In addition to this subconscious field there is also another, the superconscious, of which we shall speak later, but as this is not recognized by orthodox psychologists of today, we shall not discuss it for the present. Causes of dreams. Physical stimuli give rise to dreams in this way. The dream of inadequate clothing, for example, is doubtless produced by chilling the surface of the body, this in turn usually being due to the bedclothes falling off onto the floor. The dream of falling is probably due to the fact that by lying too long in one position, the blood supply is cut off, causing loss of sensation in the under part of the body, this in turn giving rise to the idea that we are not supported, consequently that we are flying or falling, etc. If a book is dropped, this may be symbolized as the report of a pistol in a duel, etc. Association causes many dreams in the following way. One idea or object of the mind brings up another connected with it, more or less directly, as it would be in life, and the whole storehouse of the subconscious mind is drawn upon in these associations, so that dreams are far more varied than our conscious associations. In addition to this, the third factor, namely imagination, is greatly enlarged and given free play, for the reason that the conscious, logical mind is dormant to a great extent, and hence the wild flights of imagination, which we take in sleep, are possible. The interpretation of dreams. It is because of these facts that nothing appears absurd to us while we are dreaming. No matter how ridiculous a situation may be, it never seems so to us until we are awake and able to reason over it. The curious medley of thoughts composing most dreams presents a striking resemblance to the ravings of delirium and insanity, and various medical authors have written books, aiming to show the close similarity between dreams and such insane wanderings. It has been shown of late years that almost all dreams, however illogical they may appear, are in reality more or less consistent, and that a logical strain or undercurrent may be found running through them, if they are analyzed and examined carefully enough. The celebrated Dr. Freud of Vienna has worked out an elaborate system of dream interpretation based on his exploration of the subconscious mind, and those who may be interested may consult his recent work on "Dreams." He traces most dreams to early childhood impressions, and believes that they express, as a rule, suppressed wishes which have slumbered in the subconscious mind of the dreamer and are externalized in this form. Dreams have, in fact, been compared to the bubbles which break upon the surface of a pond of water. In both cases they have risen upwards through the lower strata, and we see the finished product only. What gave rise to this? This is a subject for further investigation. How to analyze dreams. If you wish to ascertain the causes of certain dreams, you may often do so in the following manner. Place your subject, who wishes his dream analyzed, in a comfortable chair, seated in a quiet room in semi-darkness. Set going a metronome, or ask him to listen to the tick of a large clock. While doing this, certain images and impressions will arise before his mind. Ask him to tell you what these are. As soon as he has done so, question him as to the origin of these, etc., and by continued questioning, going deeper all the time into his mind, you will ultimately find out the origin of his dream. An example will prove this. A lady of our acquaintance went into hysterics every time she smelled plum pudding. She could not account for this. One night she had a dream in which she saw herself cooking pudding in the kitchen, and woke up in a great state of fear and excitement. Analysis of this dream showed that when she was a little girl she had been left alone in the kitchen while pudding was cooking, and that the pudding had burnt and nearly set the house on fire. She saw herself running from the kitchen and screaming. As soon as this was discovered, she no longer experienced any fear or unpleasant sensations while smelling any kind of pudding. She was, in fact, completely cured. The subconscious fear had been removed and its evil effects ceased. Many similar fears, which terrorize our dreams and cause nightmare, could be shown to be due to these early childish impressions, were we to analyze carefully enough such dreams. The symbolism of dreams. The main characteristic of nearly all dreams is their symbolism. Of all our experiences, dreams are doubtless the most symbolic. They represent certain wishes, desires, emotions, thoughts, etc., which fill the subconscious mind, and which become associated together, forming what are known as complexes. These thoughts, as they become externalized, are presented in symbolic form. Thus, a snake may be a symbol of fear and hatred, an angel may be a symbol of love, a key may be a symbol of success, etc. Seeing and hearing dreams. Few people see colors in dreams. The shadows and figures which make up nearly all dream images are colorless or are of the consistence of light smoke. Just why this should be so, we do not exactly know, but some artists, who deal a great deal in color, experience dreams in which all the characters are clothed in gorgeous and highly colored robes. This, however, is the exception, not the rule. Again, why do we all see figures, scenes, etc., in our dreams? We very seldom hear either music or spoken conversation. Words are more rare than pictures. The reason for this is probably that we use our eyes more continually and more consciously than we do our ears, and for this reason the visual images are more easily expressed than the auditory symbols. Smell, taste, and touch are even more rare factors in dreams than hearing. Many persons experience peculiar visions while falling to sleep. They see hundreds of tiny faces before them in the dark, which may condense into one, and this becomes larger and finally vanishes, etc. These are well understood and need cause no fear or anxiety. Persistent dream images. On the other hand, dream pictures or images may continue for some moments after awakening, and these are called persistent dream images. Thus Dr. Abercrombie mentions an instance of a medical friend of his, who, having sat up late one evening, fell asleep in his chair, and had a frightful dream in which the prominent figure was an immense baboon. He awoke with the fright, got up instantly, and walked to a table which was in the middle of the room. He was then awake and quite conscious of the articles around him, but close to the wall of the apartment he distinctly saw the baboon, making the same grimaces which he had seen in his dream, and the picture continued visible for about half a minute. This is a good case of persistent dream image. What is somnambulism? Occasionally the muscular system becomes active during sleep instead of the senses only, and then we have cases of somnambulism, in which the patient walks and talks in his sleep, etc., and even does consecutive mental work. This shows a too active condition of his subconscious mind, which should be checked by proper treatment. It is extremely dangerous to wake anyone suddenly in the middle of an access of somnambulism. If the patient talks in his sleep, it may be very interesting, at times, to converse with him in a low tone and see whether or not he will reply intelligently. Many cases are on record in which valuable information has been obtained in this way, not only about the subject, but about distant scenes and even about his spirit friends. It is possible also to cultivate automatic writing with a good somnambulist, and in one case known to us, the patient went to bed with a planchette board tied to her hand, the pencil resting on a large sheet of paper, and when she awoke in the morning, it was covered with interesting messages. This is an experiment which the enthusiastic student would do well to repeat. I must now speak of superconscious dreams, in which we are brought into contact with a higher plane of life and activity in the same way that we are in contact with a lower plane during many of our ordinary dreams. When this happens, we experience so-called supernormal dreams, of which the following are types. Supernormal dreams. 1. The telepathic dream, in which telepathy occurs during sleep between a distant living mind and the sleeping mind of the subject. Information is thereby imparted which the sleeper could not possibly have known. For instance, in one case the sleeper's brother appeared to him and notified him of his own recent accident, which proved to be true. In another case the sleeper dreamed that a friend of his told him something which also proved to be true, etc. These are so-called telepathic dreams. 2. Clairvoyant dreams, in which the subject sees distant scenes and his vision subsequently proves to be true. In such cases the dreamer apparently leaves his body and travels to the locality in question. 3. Premonitory dreams, in which a vision of the future is obtained. In a few days, weeks, or months, as the case may be, this dream vision is fulfilled to the letter. 4. Spirit communication during dreams, in which a discarnate spirit apparently appears and gives a message to the sleeper, either of consolation or perhaps tells him an important item of news which he should know. In cases of this character we border very closely upon the medium trance and true mediumship. In rare cases communication has apparently been established in this manner. Experimentally induced dreams. It is possible to induce telepathic dreams experimentally in another, and you will find it most interesting to endeavor to do this, or to serve as the subject for others who endeavor to induce certain dreams in you during your sleeping hours. In such cases the sleeper has only to describe as carefully as possible his dreams on awakening. Those who endeavor to impress the dreams upon him must picture in their minds a clearly formed series of images, allowing these to float before them in space, endeavoring to impress each one in turn upon the sleeper by the power of will. After a little practice these experiments will often be found to succeed. It is possible to control our own dreams to a certain extent if we desire to do so. Thus, on falling to sleep, you may will that you experience dreams of a certain character, and if you set about it rightly, you can obtain these in many instances. Help is frequently given in this way. I know of several cases in which a subject has fallen to sleep after mentally suggesting to herself that she would receive enlightenment, help, and counsel through her dreams concerning the difficult problems of her daily life. In practically every case this was given, though often in somewhat symbolic form. If this were cultivated, it would prove a useful adjunct to our daily lives. Remembering dreams. Another good experiment which the interested pupil should make would be to endeavor to catch himself falling asleep. That is, to analyze the gradual loss of consciousness in his own person which occurs as he is falling into sleep. Some people can catch themselves in this way and others cannot. Those who are wide awake one minute and asleep the next will probably never make first-class mediums. Those who linger in the borderland the longest are those who are naturally most psychic. Another test is that of remembering dreams. If you can remember clearly a large percentage of your dreams, you are probably quite psychic. On the other hand, if you remember nothing that has occurred during sleep, you are more or less matter-of-fact, and unless you are the exception, probably will not attain any very great development along psychic lines. It is unwise, however, to cultivate to too great an extent this habit of remembering your dreams. If you do, you will thin the wall which separates your dream life from your waking life, and if this becomes perforated, trouble may result. Keep the two distinct, therefore, after your first initial experiments at introspection and dream analysis. End of Chapter 15. Dreams. Recording by Pamela Krantz.
Chapter 16 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Recording by Amanda Friday. Chapter 16 Automatic Writing. Automatic writing means writing which is performed without the use of the conscious mind, that is, writing which is performed by the unconscious muscular energies of the hand and arm, hence automatic or non-conscious writing. A pencil is taken in the ordinary way and held over a piece of paper, and in a short time it will be noticed that slight movements of the pencil occur, making scrawling marks on the paper. As time goes on, these marks become more and more consistent and consecutive. They begin to form circles, hooks, etc., until letters, then words, and finally whole sentences are written out. How to obtain automatic writing. The best way to obtain automatic writing is to hold the arm clear of the table, that is, so that neither the wrist, nor the elbows, nor any part of the arm, touches it. In this way, a certain amount of fatigue is soon induced in the arm, and as soon as this occurs, automatic writing tends to begin. In obtaining writing of this character, you must be careful to abstract your conscious guidance from the hand as much as possible, leaving it to itself. Do not try and write anything of your own volition. Let it guide itself, even if it writes nonsense at first. Some persons obtain writing more easily if the pencil be placed between the first and second fingers, but whatever way is most convenient to you should be adopted in cultivating automatic writing. Make the mind as blank as possible. After a time you may be able to think of other things at the same time, carry on a train of conversation, read a book, etc., at the same time that your hand is writing the messages, but it is improbable that you will be able to do this at first. The chief thing is to make the mind blank and await results. 2 important rules to follow. When developing automatic writing, you should sit for not longer than 15 or 20 minutes daily, and if possible, always at the same time. It is very important that these 2 rules be observed, for 2 reasons. In the first place, your spirit friends, who are, we are told, trying to help you in your writing, would come to assist you at certain stated times more easily than irregularly, especially if you told them exactly at what time to come. It is a good plan to say aloud, just when you have finished the writing, "Goodbye, tomorrow at the same time we will sit again for the messages." In the second place, the time should be limited. When you obtain writing of this character, you are apt to get so interested in the results, when once messages begin to come, and so curious in seeing what your hand says, that you will lose all account of time, and if you have nothing urgent to do, are liable to run on hour after hour writing automatically and replying to the messages you receive. If you do this for any length of time, you will break down the wall of defense which normally exists against outside influences, and of the importance of which I have spoken so often in the preceding chapters. Mr. W. T. Stead, the well-known journalist and spiritualist, once stated that he considered these two warnings of the utmost importance, and attributed his own success, and the fact that he had never encountered any difficulties or any trouble in his automatic writing, to the fact that he had heeded strictly this advice. How Automatic Writing is Accomplished. Automatic writing is doubtless performed by the subconscious muscular action on the part of the hand and arm of the writer, that is in the majority of cases, but this does not serve to explain it, as many people believe. Granting that the actual writing is obtained in this way, the question remains, how about the information which is often obtained by means of the writing? Information which the writer could not possibly have known by any normal means. For instance, suppose you are sitting at your table, pencil in hand, waiting to see what is written. Your hand writes, "I am James Valentine. I was killed in a railroad accident this afternoon at 4 o'clock." Granting that your own hand actually moved the pencil to write this message, where did this piece of information come from? How did your mind know what to write, and the fact that James Valentine had been killed? That is the question which remains to be solved, and is the one which the majority of scientists who have undertaken to investigate and explain these phenomena slur over and leave altogether unexplained. In many other cases, also, the power seems to be greater than the medium alone could have produced, and in such cases an outside power was doubtless employed, as in many physical phenomena. The character of the messages received. Many of the messages you receive, especially at first, will doubtless prove incoherent and disconnected, like dreams. In fact, they are dreams, only instead of seeing these thoughts and visions, they are written out by your own hand. In both cases, however, it is your dream consciousness, subconsciousness, which originates the message or the visions. In many cases, however, clear and consistent messages are written, and these may be supernormal and show evidence of telepathy, clairvoyance, premonition, or spirit communication, just as dreams do. Many mediums obtain their messages direct by automatic writing. Mrs. Piper of Boston, in many ways the most famous medium in the history of psychics, obtained nearly all her communications in this manner. In her case, she passes into very deep trance while writing, and has to be supported by cushions. In your own case, it is improbable that you will go into trance at first, though you may have a tendency to do so, and if you begin to feel sleepy or drowsy during the writing, you should give way to this, and allow yourself to pass into the trance condition. In this state, many of the best messages are obtained. It is advisable, however, to do this for the first few times only in the presence of an experienced medium or psychic, who can attend to you during the period of trance, and who will ask questions for your hand to reply to, etc. Phenomena which may occur during the writing. This feeling of drowsiness appears very often in automatic writing, but it is not universal. Many mediums who obtain remarkable messages in this manner have never passed into trance, and have no desire to do so. They remain perfectly normal throughout. It may be that when you begin to write, your hand and arm will show signs of insensibility, that is, it will lose its sensation and any feeling of pain, etc. It becomes, as we say, anesthetic. You may be quite unconscious of this fact, and only discover it by accident. A good plan is to have a friend test it for you. When you are obtaining automatic writing, close your eyes and turn your head away, then ask your friend to prick you very lightly with a needle in various parts of your hands and arms, and see whether you experience any pain. It is quite possible that you will not do so, even if the pricks are severe. It is curious to note, however, that these pricks are noticed by the subconscious mind, for it often happens that the hand will write automatically, "You are hurting me," or "You pricked me in the third finger joint," or something of the kind, while you yourself might remain totally ignorant of the fact, so far as any consciousness of it was concerned. It is important for you to remember that automatic messages, like all messages of a like character, must be judged and accepted for what they are worth. More phenomena. Some of these messages are very remarkable, and contain sound advice which can be followed with profit. Some apparently originate from those spirit friends who claim to give them. On the other hand, many of them are foolish, lying, or merely silly, so that here, as in all other cases, discrimination must be used, and you must exert your own common sense and judgment in the matter of accepting these messages, and you must see to what extent you may be willing to abide and profit by the advice given. It sometimes happens that automatic writing forms letters, but these appear curiously shaped, and the words cannot be read, Sometimes it begins at the right hand side of the page and writes toward the left, like Hebrew. When this is the case, it is always a good plan to hold the sheet of paper up to a mirror to see whether the writing can be read in this way. If so, the writing has been merely reversed and is what we term mirror writing. Some persons can write with the left hand as well as with the right, but usually this is not the case, except with left-handed persons. The reason seems to be that the left hand is poorly developed as a writing machine. For this reason, we can hardly expect any intelligence who may desire to give messages, to find this an easy way of expressing them. Still it may be tried after writing has been obtained by the right hand. Occasionally messages are given in foreign languages or in queer tongues, unknown to the sitter. These may be genuine messages, and if they come in a language unknown to you, you may be more or less assured that they emanate from some spirit friend who speaks the language in question. Occasionally, however, your hand will write gibberish, and there are many cases on record where this has been done and no true language has been written. How to Develop the Power. It is a good plan to sit in a semi-darkened room while obtaining automatic writing, in a comfortable position, and with the mind as free from care and preoccupation as possible. Automatic writing may, however, be obtained in a light room, if desired. Telepathic experiments may be tried in this manner. A friend of yours may try to impress upon you certain words, cards, figures, etc., which your hand writes automatically. The writing, you must remember, is only another method for the subconscious to express itself to the conscious mind, and happens to be a motor channel rather than a sensory channel. If it were the latter, you would see or hear the message instead of writing it. In both cases, however, the phenomena represent mere emergence. It is not necessary to write automatically with a pencil, for a planchette board, Ouija board, or some other apparatus may be used for this purpose. Indeed, this is a much simpler method to begin with, and writing is obtained more easily than by the pencil alone. Most people find it more satisfactory, however, to discard these instruments later on and employ the pencil direct. The above rules should enable the student to obtain automatic writing in a comparatively short time. Patience is required here as elsewhere. Hold the mind in a receptive attitude, send out a mental call for guidance and wisdom, and do not come to the conclusion too quickly that the messages you receive are nonsense. Often a jumble of letters that, at first sight, mean nothing, may form a very significant message when rightly interpreted. End of Chapter 16. Recording by Amanda Friday. Chapter 17 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Recording by Amanda Friday. Chapter 17 Crystal Gazing and Shell Hearing. Crystal gazing means, simply, the practice of looking into a ball of crystal, glass, or some similar substance, and endeavoring to see within it pictures or images which apparently present themselves to the eye, while thus gazing at it. Crystal gazing is very ancient. The Egyptians used it in their practices of divination, and, throughout ancient history, we find traces of this magical art. In the Middle Ages it was revived, especially by the learned Dr. Dee, who lived in the reign of Queen Elizabeth in England, and who employed a seer, or scryer, by the name of Kelly. Dr. Dee wrote a book on his researches, which work is now classical. In more recent times, crystal gazing has been made a subject of special study by the Psychical Research Society, and several books may now be had upon the question. It is a very simple, and at the same time, one of the safest means of psychic development. It is not necessary, as a matter of fact, to employ a crystal, or even a glass ball, particularly if you are a good subject, but it would greatly help matters if you did possess one, and we should advise the student to procure one, if possible, and use this for purposes of experimentation. How to begin. The best way to begin is to procure a crystal of at least 3 inches in diameter, larger if possible, and mount it upon a slender wooden stand. The stand and crystal should be placed against a background of black felt or cloth, and the crystal should be shaded with more cloth of the same character, so that there is no highlight anywhere upon it, that is, no point upon which the sun's rays fall, making it a bright spot. If the outlines of the ball appear a little cloudy and uncertain, owing to the semi-darkness, this will often help matters. Place yourself in front of the ball, your eyes being about a foot from its surface. You should be seated in a comfortable chair, your eyes shaded from the light, and relaxed in body and quiet in mind. Gaze steadily at the crystal for a few minutes. Do not strain or focus the eyes particularly upon any part of the ball, or try to see into its interior. Do not blink the eyes more than you can help. At the same time do not strain them by trying to keep them open for any length of time without blinking. Do not let your eyes wander from the ball, nor your attention relax from the subject in hand. Do not let your eyes stare vacantly, but look intently at the ball without undue strain or concentration. Try not to think of anything in particular during the process of this gazing. Make the mind fairly blank. At the same time, do not allow yourself to become sleepy or the mind to become totally blank to outside impressions. It is inadvisable to keep this up for more than 5 minutes at a time at first, for if you do you will find that your eyes will become strained and will water after you leave off the experiment. If this is the case, you may be sure you have continued gazing for too long a period. As in automatic writing, it is advisable, if possible, to sit at the same time every day while developing, and for the same length of time each day. This time may be lengthened as you progress, though it is usually found unnecessary to look into the crystal for more than a few minutes at a time, for you cannot get consistent, long drawn out visions as you can automatic writing. Explanation of crystal gazing. Crystal gazing depends largely upon the ability possessed by the psychic to visualize, or express in pictorial form, thoughts and images which arise from the subconscious mind. The majority of crystal visions are of this character. You must not assume that because you see figures in the ball that these figures are really in that place, that is, that they are objective or external and exist within the crystal. No, they are mental pictures, or hallucinations, but they are expressed or externalized in this way. For example, you may think of a friend's face and bring it up vividly before your mind's eye as a memory picture. Now, in ordinary life, the process of externalization ends there, but if you are a good visualizer you can carry it further and actually project into the crystal the picture of your thought, placing it in the ball, where you will see your friend's face clearly reflected from within its depths. But your friend is not really in the ball. It is merely your mental conception or picture of him. Nearly all crystal visions are of this character, as before said. Supernormal crystal visions. Crystal visions, however, often contain information and messages which the sitter could not possibly have known normally, and which are conveyed to him by this means. For instance, you may look into the ball one day and see, acted before you in the crystal vision, a tragedy in which some friend of yours plays a part. You know nothing whatever about this, yet later on you receive from this friend a letter, telling you of the details of the tragedy in question. Your vision has proved correct. It is authentic and supernormal in character. Thus you will see that crystal visions are more than mere empty visions or hallucinations. The character and content of these pictures often convey striking information, and they may be telepathic, clairvoyant, or premonitory, just as dreams are. Or they may represent genuine spirit messages conveyed from some deceased friend or relative. It is no unknown thing to see words written in the ball as though you were reading handwriting. A friend of mine once looked into her crystal ball and saw within it a newspaper notice of the death of her dearest friend. She was totally ignorant of the fact, and only learned it later on. This same lady, who is a writer, has the power of projecting or placing in the crystal, at will, figures or scenes which she conjures up before her, and when they are in the ball they will continue acting out the parts assigned to them, just as they would in a dream, for the figures seen in the crystal are not inert and motionless, but move about and appear to have life and motion of their own. On many occasions when this lady placed the characters of a novel she was writing into the crystal by an effort of will, she was enabled to see them there, and they frequently enacted certain scenes which gave her a good idea for the continuation of the plot of the story. In such a case, you will see, crystal gazing performed a very useful and practical service. How to develop the power. You may develop the power of visualizing in yourself, which is extremely important, by such simple imagination exercises as the following. Ask yourself a question such as, "What was the color of Mother Hubbard's dog? Was Jack the Giant Killer dark or fair? Was Helen of Troy tall, or small and slender?" Such questions as these should bring up before your mind's eye an immediate answer in the form of a mental picture of the person or event in question, and if they do not do so, you may be sure that your power of visualizing is not good and will have to be developed before you can have clear crystal visions. If your power of visualizing is extremely good, you will probably be enabled, after a certain length of time, to dispense with the ball altogether and see your visions upon a white or black background by concentrating upon it, and finally anywhere in space that you may choose to induce them. When you have arrived at this stage of development, however, you are very far along the path of successful mediumship. Clouding and Visualization. If you are to obtain crystal visions, you will probably notice that, just before the vision appears, the ball will cloud over as though a blackish gray mist were filling it, or were interposed between your eyes and it. This clouding, as it is called, is well known, and is a symptom of oncoming visions. If after sitting for 5 minutes every day for a couple of weeks, you do not obtain any visions at all, you may rest assured that you are a very poor visualizer, and will probably not succeed in this direction. You might try, however, one simple experiment for a few days longer. Gaze at a bright and highly colored object, upon which the light is falling, for about a minute. Then close your eyes for a few seconds, and then look at the ball. If you are ever to see anything, you should, after a few attempts, see within the ball a duplicate of the object you have been looking at, in its complementary colors. It is asserted by a certain school of occultists that the visions seen within the crystal are not invariably subjective or hallucinatory, but are real entities, and that the figures have an independent existence apart from the seer. This, however, is a complicated question which is unsuitable for a primary book of instruction upon psychic development, such as the present. It will therefore be omitted from consideration with this brief mention. Shell hearing. If you place to your ear 2 large conch shells, you will hear a peculiar rushing or roaring sound as of the sea in the far distance. This is only natural, and probably due to the air within its cavities and the resounding properties of the various curves of the shell. So far all is simple enough. But many persons, who are slightly psychic, as soon as they place the shells to their ears, hear distinct and characteristic sounds, usually in the form of whispered or spoken words. These words may be inarticulate. They may be incoherent like dreams. They may repeat your own name time after time, or they may convey systematic and definite messages. As in the case of crystal gazing, dreams, and automatic writing, shell hearing is a method of externalizing, or expressing in outward form, the thoughts and auditory messages of the subconscious mind. But they may be more than this. They may at times embody telepathic, clairvoyant, or premonitory messages, or they may represent genuine spirit communication. It all depends on the content of the message, and upon the character of the words spoken, just as in planchette writing. If you obtain a jumble of nonsense, you may be sure that it is the product of your own subconscious activity, but if you obtain a characteristic and direct message, you may have reason to believe it emanates from the friend it purports to proceed from. In shell hearing, it is the same. Important warnings and advice. If the messages are nonsensical, they should be disregarded. If, on the other hand, they are interesting, clear-cut, and are proved to be correct, you should regard them as possibly genuine mediumistic messages, and they should be judged and valued by you accordingly. In all cases of this character, here as elsewhere, you must use your own critical judgment and common sense upon the messages you receive. Shell hearing is certainly one of the clearest, at the same time one of the most pleasant methods of receiving communications that can be employed. The voices which you hear may be recognizable or unrecognizable. It is the former that are a good proof of authenticity. They may develop by themselves, or emerge from a confused babel of sound. Unrecognized voices will often utter warnings, or convey information of this character. Human voices are not always heard in the shell, but occasional musical and other sounds which cannot easily be described. Finally, an important warning should be heeded. If after discontinuing shell hearing you continue to hear voices, you should immediately drop all experiments for some days, as this phenomenon of insistent voices is one of the first symptoms of danger. As long as the manifestations are well controlled, you may feel that you are on the safe road and developing as you should, but if they begin to get beyond your control, you should stop shell hearing for some time, until you have strengthened your inner self to such an extent that you think it advisable to continue experimenting again in this direction. End of chapter 17. Recording by Amanda Friday. Chapter 18. of your psychic powers and how to develop them. Recording by Amanda Friday. Chapter 18. Spiritual Healing. Spiritual healing means that mentally or physically sick persons may be, and are, healed by the power of a spiritual energy operating through the body of a certain medium, or more or less directly, without his agency. It is distinct from hypnotism, mesmerism, magnetic healing, faith cure, mind cure, or any other kind of healing whatever, and must not be confused with them. All these other curative measures depend upon suggestion, or upon the hidden and unknown powers of the human body to effect the cure. But spiritual healing is more direct. It is not the medium who heals in this case, but a form of spiritual energy which operates through him. What is spiritual healing? Spiritual healing is effected in various ways, as the following definitions, adopted by the National Spiritualist Association, will show: A. By the spiritual influences working through the body of the medium, and thus infusing curative, stimulating, and vitalizing fluids and energy into the diseased parts of the patient's body. B. By the spiritual influences illuminating the brain of the healing medium, and thereby intensifying the perception of the medium, so that the case, nature, and seat of the disease in the patient become known to the medium, and the herb or other remedy which will benefit the patient also becomes known to the medium. C. Through the application of absent treatments, whereby spiritual beings combine their own healing forces with the magnetism and vitalizing energy of the medium, and convey them to the patient who is distant from the medium, and cause them to be absorbed by the system of the patient. It will be seen that these definitions not only cover the facts of spiritual healing, but also absent treatment and psychic diagnosis. Advice is given on numerous occasions by the "spirits" as to the exact course of treatment to be followed. From all this it will be seen that spiritual healing is not only very different from any other kind of healing, but that it is also far more inclusive and more wonderful. How cures are effected. The principle upon which spiritual healing is said to be based is simply this: a certain vital and magnetic energy is contained in every living body. In health, this is large in quantity, and in disease this stock becomes depleted. Ordinarily, the only way to recover this lost vitality and energy is to rest, sleep, and take care of the body and mind, that this vital energy again fills and recharges it to the same extent as before. But this is a slow and uncertain process. It is, however, the only sure way we know. Stimulants, etc., which apparently add strength to the body, do not do so in reality. They abstract it faster. When we expend it faster, we are under the delusion that we are stronger, but ultimately we are weaker. In the case of spiritual healing, on the other hand, it is very different. Vital energy is imparted to the system from without. It fills the nerve centers and literally adds new life to the whole body. These nerve centers being aroused, the various functions of the body are stimulated in turn, and in this manner the patient is cured. The Cosmic Vital Energy. This vital energy which is imparted by means of spiritual healing is a great cosmic power which pervades the whole universe. It is everywhere. It is back of every phenomenon. In it we live and move and have our being. It is illimitable in extent and in power. We simply have to draw upon it to the extent we can, and the more we can draw the more rapidly do we become well, the speedier the cure. There is no reason to suppose that, if we could tap this great reservoir in the right way, we should not become well instantly, and indeed there are many cases of this character, where apparently this has been done, instances of so-called miraculous "cures" being of this nature. We must learn to tap the source of spiritual energy, and when we have reached this inexhaustible fountain, then health and strength are ours. Healing Miracles. The facts of spiritual healing are as old as history. The laying on of hands was one of the most ancient modes of treatment, and was employed by the Egyptians. Christ employed it frequently. When a woman touched the hem of his garment, and he perceived that the virtue had gone out of him, he doubtless felt a loss of the precious vital magnetism by means of which he effected his marvelous cures. The healing miracles in the New Testament are full of cases of this character, and in our own day we often read of wondrous cures effected by those who have somehow learned to come in touch with a higher power, some source of energy not available to all of us, and to draw upon it for the purpose of their healing miracles. To a certain extent, Doubtless we draw upon this fund during our sleep, but it may be drawn upon in far larger quantities by those who have the secret of how to do so. Some spiritual healers can do this, but discarnate spirits can apparently direct and manipulate this vital energy far more effectively, and to better purpose, for the reason that, living as they do in the world of spiritual energy, they understand more of its laws and can better control and govern them. Hence they can effect a cure, very often, when every other means has failed. Possible explanation of such cures. While it is true that most cures depend upon this vitalizing magnetic current, it is possible that in certain cases actual physical transformation are effected. There are many cases on record in which actual tissue has been replaced, apparently instantaneously, by some extraordinary means. In these cases, it is possible that the spiritual energy has actually built up a part of the body, out of matter and the vital forces which were employed, materialized it, in fact, and left this part of the body whole and sound as before. To those who believe in the reality of materialization, that human bodies of flesh and blood can be built up out of invisible elements, there is nothing incredible in this suggestion, but it is only advanced as a tentative and possible explanation of certain facts which have, to date, received no explanation whatever. How to draw upon the cosmic energy. The great question is, how are we to draw upon this great store of energy? If we are alone, how effect a cure within ourselves? And if you are a medium, how cultivate and develop the power of drawing upon this cosmic energy to such an extent that cures may thereby be effected through or by the means of your instrumentality? Let us take the former question first. We will suppose you are alone, with no one near to help you. You desire to be helped and cured by spiritual means. What are you to do? In the first place, you must learn how to relax. If your muscles are tense and rigid, you will never receive any influx of spiritual energy. You shut it out, since the receptive attitude is the only one in which this energy can be obtained. So you must ensure complete muscular relaxation. It may be obtained as follows. Lie on a hard couch with no support for the head. Relax all over as completely as possible. Then think of your neck. You will probably find it tense and stiff when your attention is turned upon it, and that you are holding your head on your shoulders. Relax it, allowing the head to sink into the couch and support it. When you have done this thoroughly, think of your right arm and relax that. Then the left arm, then the right leg, then the left leg, and finally the whole trunk. After you have encircled the body in this way 2 or 3 times, you will be well relaxed, and you must then begin your breathing exercises. Breathe slowly and regularly, inhaling from the diaphragm, not the chest. Breathe through the nose, as before explained. Keep up these breathing exercises for 5 minutes, expanding the lungs and seeing to it that you have plenty of fresh air. This will be quite enough for the first day or two, and it is inadvisable to try any more. You will arise refreshed and invigorated as the result of your exercise. Progressive exercises. On the 3rd day you may begin your mental practices when breathing. With every breath you take in, think to yourself, I am power, I am strength, I am health, I am well, etc. Keep this up for 3 or 4 minutes, concentrating upon it, and really believing it. Then rest quietly for a minute or two. Then quietly and hopefully call upon this spiritual energy to cure you. Remember, the more completely you can give yourself up to the influences which come to help and cure you, the more completely and rapidly will you be cured. Send out a mental call for help and assistance, and it will surely come to you. The function of the vital body. Spiritual healing depends, very largely, upon the fact that the physical body can be acted upon, and influenced, from higher spheres and planes of activity, through or by means of the vital or etheric body which inhabits the physical body. This inner body acts as a sort of medium or vehicle, through which the cosmic energy flows, and the problem is to connect up this inner body both with the physical body on the one hand, and with the great reservoir of spiritual energy on the other. It must be admitted that we do not know exactly how this is done, in the present age of the world's spiritual evolution. If we did, we should be enabled to perform almost miraculous cures, instantly, resembling those of Christ, who doubtless possessed a wonderful knowledge of these laws. If the law is to be discovered at all, it is doubtless along these lines. Experiment, therefore, and when you hit upon certain positive results, you may be sure that you have discovered a portion of the great truth. Do not assume, however, on that account, that you have the whole truth, for you will make a great mistake if you do. How to become a spiritual healer. Now let us suppose that you are a medium and that you are treating someone else. You desire to gain this power and to obtain assistance from the spirit world. This is how you should proceed. You must first of all see to it that you are in good physical health. If you are not, your vital magnetism is apt to be tainted and injure the patient. Further, as you often draw the patient's ills from his body into yours, you must be in good health to do this. Next, your mind must be receptive, sympathetic, and in an attitude of kindly helpfulness. If you feel selfish, this at once sets up a barrier or wall which you will be unable to break through. Finally, your psychic sensitiveness and mediumship must be developed to a certain extent to enable you to practice this phase with any hope of success. The methods which you must follow to increase your mediumistic power have been explained in some of the previous chapters, and will be more fully explained in those which follow. Now, assuming that you have your patient before you, place your hands on his forehead and make gentle strokings. Then place one hand on his forehead and one on his solar plexus. Take a number of deep breaths, asking your patient to close his eyes and breathe with you in perfect rhythm. In this way you get into unison and sympathy. Then make yourself negative and ask the spiritual power to come and help and assist you in your process of cure. Make yourself a channel for it. You will feel tingling sensations in your arms, and the patient will feel them in his body. This is the beginning of the process. Try to find just the right mental and spiritual attitude, and power will certainly come. From day to day, your ability to draw upon the great cosmic energy will increase. You will get greater and greater power, and as this develops, you will be able to handle and control it more and more. Your power as a spiritual healer will in this manner increase from day to day. End of Chapter 18. Recording by Amanda Friday.
Chapter 19 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Recording by Alex Carraz. Chapter 19. The Cultivation of Sensitiveness. Sensitiveness means the ability to sense or perceive in some subtle manner auras, impressions, and influences, either issuing from another living person or from some thing or emanating from spirits. In so far as a sensitive or medium can sense or feel these influences, he is a psychic. And the cultivation of this power is, in a sense, the essence of all true progress in mediumship. This is, therefore, one of the most important lessons which can be learned. For as you progress in psychic sensitiveness, you also progress in mediumship, other things being equal. The first chapter of this book was devoted to development, but that only gave the outward form, as it were, of the process, and did not enter in any way fully into its essence. We cannot pretend to do so even in this chapter, since the subject is too vast and too delicate. But I may take the student some distance further along the road, for after he has mastered the preceding chapters, he will be more enabled to undertake these exercises than he was at the beginning of his development. How to distinguish true from false. One of the greatest difficulties, doubtless, in the cultivation of sensitiveness is how to distinguish true from false, hallucination from reality. At first, this will doubtless be next to impossible, and many false steps will have to be taken before you find, from actual bitter experience, what is true and what is not. But as the inner sense becomes developed, you will find that it not only gives you the knowledge in question, but that it also enables you to distinguish one from the other, true from false, and illuminates the whole subject so that mistake is almost impossible. This certainty, which you will then have, cannot be communicated to another. It is often impossible to prove to one who does not experience this inner vision of reality that what you receive is true, nonetheless. As Mr. Charles Brent says in his Sixth Sense, the serious crux is how, in the realm of the spiritual and the physically intangible, to distinguish between the real and the seeming, the true and the false. This is the function of the mystic sense to do, aided by the full complement of inner faculties. In a measure, the mystic sense, like the bodily senses, acts automatically, but like them it needs special training in order to separate phantasm from reality, to determine values, and to grade and classify ideals until they reveal themselves to be ordered unity, not less but more mysterious because more intelligible, to the whole man. It is because of all this that long training in psychic development is necessary, and sudden jumps or leaps into full possession of this knowledge is impossible. The first step. The first thing to do in cultivating your inner sensitiveness is to stimulate your physical senses to the point of their highest activity. Endeavor to perceive and feel vibrations unfelt by others, for much depends upon vibration. Train your senses. Then train yourself in seeing auras and in psychometry, as before explained. In this way, getting further along the road. Try to see and to feel the emanation coming from people you meet. Look at them steadily and see whether you cannot discover a sort of hot air or vaporous emanation issuing from their bodies and radiating out into space. As soon as you have succeeded in this, begin to analyze your feelings and emotions and interpret them. Do this, 1. When you touch the person in question, 2. When you receive a letter from him, which you should hold in your hand or between both hands, 3. When you hear him speak, and 4. When you merely see him. When trying these experiments, assume a listening attitude, as before explained, and breathe slowly and deeply. This breathing must not be too conscious so as to take your attention, however. Relax yourself as much as possible during this period. Try in the dark or semi-dark at first, in the light later on. Psychic atmosphere. When you are walking along the street, cultivate the practice of sensing persons and seeing their aura. You will soon be able to feel a sort of air or atmosphere about each individual, just as there is a definite air or atmosphere about a house or a town. Thus, a manufacturing town has quite a different atmosphere from one which is not. You will soon be able to get this in a general manner. After you have progressed thus far, you should endeavor to feel any cuts, bruises, pains, etc., which may be upon a person's body. You should do this at first by passing your open hands gently over the surface of the body, and as soon as you come to a spot which is sensitive and sore, you will feel a slight pain in your own body in the corresponding place. Before you are able to do this with much success, however, you should develop certain phases of psychometry, as for instance the following. Make a number of small paper packages, all exactly alike in appearance. In these place salt, pepper, mustard, cloves, nutmeg, sugar, cayenne, etc. Mix these all up so you cannot tell which is which. Now practice feeling or handling these until you can tell the contents of any given package by merely feeling the paper in which it was wrapped. As soon as you have done this, you are ready for more advanced practices. Having progressed thus far, you are in a position to try your first experiments in psychic diagnosis. Pass your hands over the body of your patient, who should be divested of as many clothes as possible, and if your sensitiveness has begun to develop, you will feel a pain or some sensation in your hand or arm, or in some corresponding part of your own body, as you reach the diseased spot in your patient's body. Cultivate this until you can succeed with more or less certainty and precision. The more you practice this, the more perfect you will become, and the more rapid your advancement will be. When you have reached this stage, you must go one step further. Having located the seat of the trouble and its general nature, you must seek to know how to cure it. Hold the mind in a receptive attitude when doing this, and you will soon begin to receive the distinct impression that you must do something for the patient, but you will not know as yet what it is. After a little time, you will get the distinct impression what to do. To make certain passes or manipulations, to prescribe a certain drug, to apply certain water applications, etc. As soon as you have reached this stage, you are on the high road to becoming a successful spiritual healer, and your power will develop with every sitting. It would be well for you at this stage to sit by yourself, especially for development in this direction. An added power will doubtless be given you with which to work your cures. Progressive exercises in self-development. It may be, however, that you do not care to develop your sensitiveness in this direction. You wish only to develop it for your own progress, and not for the purpose of becoming a healer at all. In that case, you must follow a slightly different method of development, though all the exercises we have described will be found helpful and advantageous. If you desire to cultivate your own sensitiveness, the following exercises will be found very useful in this connection. 1. Try to analyze your own emotions when in the presence of A. a large company of people, and B. a small gathering. You will probably find that your impressions are very different, and that a large crowd will give you the impression of being more scattered in mind than a small one. In other words, you will begin to sense or feel the mind of the crowd. It is well known that such a thing exists, for crowds will often do things and perform actions which no individual in it would perform alone. If you can sense this mind of the crowd, your sensitiveness is progressing favorably and rapidly. 2. Stand before a mirror. See whether or not you are enabled to perceive any influence coming from your reflected image in the mirror. Many sensitive persons can do this, and the more sensitive you are, the more you can feel this. You will sense a magnetic fluid coming from the reflected form in the mirror. 3. If you are in the habit of sleeping with anyone regularly, endeavor to analyze the impressions you receive from the aura emanating from the body of the person with whom you may be sleeping. See whether this is positive or negative. Positive aura is slightly warm. Negative aura is somewhat cold. 4. Hold your right hand above a mirror, then the left hand. Try to feel whether one hand feels cooler than the other, or whether both are of equal temperature. The hand which is warmest is on the more positive side of the body. 5. Close your eyes, and have someone make magnetic passes over your head and shoulders. Try to tell whether those passes are being made in an upward or downward direction. Downward passes are positive or sleeping passes. Upward passes are negative or waking passes. 6. Procure several metals, such as copper, iron, tin, zinc, etc. Place your hand over each in turn, and ascertain the different impressions you get from each one. Then wrap them in separate pieces of paper, making all alike in appearance, and see whether you can always tell the correct metal from feeling the paper. Then place your open hand over the paper without touching it. Next, remove your hand gradually further and further away until you are some distance from the metal. After a time you should be enabled to do all this from a considerable distance. It is only an extension of this power which enables dowsers, or metal and water finders, to locate the whereabouts of metal and water under the ground, by walking over the spot above the ground with hands outstretched or with a divining or dowsing rod held in their hands. 7. Always have flowers in your sleeping room. They are a good influence. Analyze the difference between your impressions when the flowers are removed and when they are in the room. Colors and emotions. 8. Procure some watercolors and paint solid strips of color on a piece of white paper. Make these about 1/2 inch broad and 3 inches long. On one piece paint a bright red strip, on another a vivid blue, on another emerald green, on another black, etc. Blindfold your eyes. Shuffle the papers and then place your hand on the topmost one and see whether you can tell from your impressions what color you are touching. Red will give you a sensation of warmth, light blue of cold, etc., as explained in the chapter devoted to color and its interpretation. 9. Try to cultivate what is known as sensitiveness to psychic contagion. You must remember that thoughts and emotions are just as contagious as diseases, and that you can catch them in just the same way. When in the company of other persons, therefore, endeavor to catch or feel their emotions and feelings. You will probably get at first the thoughts, etc., they are expressing, then those which they are just about to express, so that you take the words out of their mouths. Then you will begin to sense the feelings and emotions of the speaker before they are put into words. Finally, you will be enabled to appreciate his whole feeling and thinking self by a species of intuition or impression. Endeavor to draw this out of your subject, and do not let it come to you without any effort on your part. Be active, that is, instead of merely passive. In this way lies safety and success. The expression of impressions received. 10. Finally, you must teach yourself to express what you feel. Often this is most difficult. You may feel a thing and feel inclined to say it, but something seems to hold you back until it is too late. Overcome this restrictive feeling. It is important you should do so, for this is one of the most important things to learn in the cultivation of mediumship. When you have learned to express your impressions, you have progressed far along the road. These practices in the cultivation of sensitiveness are the most valuable you can have as a preparation for the cultivation of true mediumship. At the same time, they are safe exercises to follow. Practice them, therefore, before you attempt any definitely mediumistic exercises, and you will be rewarded by a safe and sane increase of your inner spiritual faculties. End of Chapter 19. Recording by Alex Carraz, New York.
Chapter 20 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Trance. Trance is a condition into which certain mediums enter in order to receive messages and give them in the form of speaking or writing. No one knows at the present time what the medium trance is, or, for that matter, any other kind of trance. Dr. George Moore, in his Use of the Body in Relation to the Mind, says, "Trance is a state of body sometimes produced in man, a condition utterly inexplicable by any principle taught in the schools." Professor William James stated his belief that the medium trance was different from any other trance of which we have any knowledge, and this seems to be borne out by the fact that spirit messages are given in this condition, as well as telepathic, clairvoyant, and premonitory messages of all kinds. What is trance? Both trance and catalepsy occur spontaneously. Both may also be induced artificially by hypnotism. Both are mistaken for death, and in many respects they are very similar. In catalepsy, the body is rigid, whereas in trance this is very rarely the case, this forming the chief mark of distinction, external indication, between the two states. What the internal differences are, we do not know. Various attempts, however, have been made to define them. Dr. Franz Hartmann, e.g., thus distinguishes them. Quote, "There seems hardly any limit to the time during which a person may remain in a trance, but catalepsy is due to some obstruction in the organic mechanism of the body on account of its exhausted nervous power. In the last case, the activity of life begins again as soon as the impediment is removed, or the nervous energy has recuperated its strength." End quote. Death, Its Causes and Phenomena, by Hereward, Carrington, and John R. Meader. When a hypnotist places his subject under hypnotic control, the subject remains en rapport with the operator. The influence comes from a living person. In the medium trance, it seems possible that the operator is not a living but a deceased person, and that it is a kind of telepathic influence from spirits which induces this state. In fact, it is brought about by influence from the other side. Light and deep trance. There are all grades and degrees of trance, from the very light stage, in which there is but little difference from the ordinary waking consciousness, to that degree of deep trance where the medium is totally unconscious of everything that passes around him. Very deep trance of this character is rare, but many of the most famous mediums have got their best messages while in that condition. The famous Mrs. Piper of Boston had almost to die, to all outward appearances, before she could enter this deep trance, and at the end of 2 hours or so, during which the trance lasted, the only signs of life were slow respiration and heartbeat. The only signs of consciousness were manifest in the right hand and arm, which did the automatic writing. Many test mediums and sensitives, on the other hand, pass into a stage of trance so light that no one but an expert could detect any trance at all. Yet in many such cases, no memory of the condition remains after the trance is finished. These light trances differ but slightly from cases of daydreams, absent-mindedness, etc., when we say to a person, half in joke, "You are in a trance." By shades and degrees this becomes deeper, as the state becomes more profound and lower layers or strata of the subconscious mind are reached. Mrs. Piper had 3 distinct layers of this character. The first differed slightly from the waking state. In this condition she talked. The second condition was far deeper trance, and in this stage spirits were seen instead of human beings. In the third or deepest stage, speech was usually absent and automatic writing occurred. Spirit control during trance. In trance, we may assume that there is a gradual and fluctuating control of the medium's mind and body by the communicating spirit, and that as one vacates or is driven out by the invading intelligence, the latter is able to control more and more effectually the medium. Just as 2 solid bodies cannot be in the same place at the same time, so 2 spirit intelligences cannot occupy and control the same body at the same moment. When once the fact of spirit control is granted, The nature and character of this control remains to be solved. How does the spirit manipulate the brain and nervous mechanism of the medium to bring about the desired results? What parts of the brain are used, and how? These and many similar questions remain to be answered, and it may take many years of scientific research before we are enabled to answer queries such as these with any degree of confidence. The difference between somnambulism and trance. The difference between somnambulism and the medium trance seems to be that in the former we remain en rapport with ourselves, and in the latter we are in touch with the spirit world. Many mediums who give inspirational messages or lectures from the platform are in a condition of light trance, and children have been known to pass into this condition and give a large amount of valuable information unknown to their seniors, and which certainly could not have been known to themselves. Properly managed, the trance condition is not harmful, though it may become so in the hands of blundering persons. The Spiritualist's Manual gives 4 chief reasons why the trance state should not be harmful to those who enter it. These are: various methods of conveying information during trance. 1. The intelligences acting upon them, the mediums, are almost invariably of a superior character, and therefore must mold the organism by constant use for the expression of higher forms of thought. 2. The relation of the medium to the manifesting intelligence is that of pupil to teacher, sometimes that of a child to a wise and loving parent, and sometimes both these relations, combined with a subtle and ennobling spirituality. 3. There is always a mutual spiritual relation, even though the medium is not humanly conscious of it, and no one can be a medium for the perfect expression of spiritual messages or discourses who does not consent to the procedure and cooperate with the manifesting spirit. 4. As the master musician improves the instrument he plays upon, so also a spirit controlling a human organism for the purpose of expressing wholesome thought imparts a greater power both to the brain and spirit of the medium. It is often difficult for spirits to control a medium sufficiently to manifest in any way through him. Different types of control. There are various types of control which are used by spirits in trance mediumship. A. There is the telepathic method, in which the thought is conveyed direct to the mind of the medium, who is sufficiently awake in light trance to receive this thought and give it out to the sitter in speech or writing. B. There is the picture or pictographic method, in which the spirits present certain images or pictures to the clairvoyant eye of the medium, and these pictures are seen and interpreted either directly or symbolically. C. There is the sense impression method, in which general sensations or impressions are conveyed to the medium, who takes on the condition of the communicating spirit, describes pains felt in various parts of the body, etc., as the case may be. D. There is the direct control method, in which the spirit apparently removes the medium's own spirit more or less from the body, in deep trance, and manipulates it as he would an instrument, by acting upon the nervous system direct, in much the same way that we act upon our own nervous systems throughout life. This latter method is very rare, and is only found in cases of very deep trance. Doubtless there are other methods which spirits employ at times, and probably combine all the above on occasion. But these are the most distinctive methods, and they are the ones which may be seen more readily than any others in cases of trance mediumship. In cases of so-called ecstasy, the spirit of the medium obtains the information himself, either by clairvoyant vision or by partially separating itself from the body and visiting the spiritual world direct. The visions which are obtained in ecstasy are thus descriptive of the spiritual world, and what is happening there, and for this reason most of the revelations, so-called, are ecstatic visions, more or less symbolic. The best way to enter trance. Many persons cannot enter trance spontaneously, but have to be mesmerized by another person before this condition is brought about. Even Andrew Jackson Davis was mesmerized for years before he could develop spontaneous trance, so that he could enter it at will. This may be one of the best ways for the beginner to begin his trance mediumship, but you should take care that the person who mesmerizes you is of a suitable temperament and in every way fitted and qualified to do so. If he is not, you are liable to attract to yourself spirits of a lower order, and then you will bring to yourself lying and malevolent spirits, and you may induce a case of so-called obsession. However, if the operator is harmonious and qualified for his task, he will not only prevent this, but would see you through more safely than if you entered this condition spontaneously and by yourself. Trance is very closely akin to some cases of suspended animation, to certain yoga trance conditions, and even death itself, which has been called its twin brother. As we have seen, however, it differs from all these very widely. Spontaneous trance is doubtless the most commonly experienced, and is the one which you should endeavor to cultivate in yourself, other things being equal. During these conditions, as you develop, many odd and striking phenomena will doubtless become manifest to you. If your hand writes automatically, you will probably note that it becomes more or less sensitive, or anesthetic, as explained in the chapter on automatic writing. If speech is induced as the result of trance, this may be striking and coherent, or quite possibly mere nonsense and gibberish. If the latter develops, you may be sure that something is wrong, and you should strive to ascertain what this condition is and correct it if possible. Here, as elsewhere, you must be careful and exercise your own judgment and discretion on the messages received, and not to accept all these as absolute truth, for if you do, you are likely to be greatly deceived, especially at the beginning of your mediumship, where everything is faulty and difficult. The clearer the communications, generally speaking, the surer the messages. But those coming through what might be called amateur mediums are to be trusted only when they have been verified. How to experiment with the trance. You may experiment with your own trance condition profitably in the following manner. Sit with pencil in hand for automatic writing, and induce one or more friends of yours to do the same thing at the same time. See whether there is any connection between your writings when they are compared the next day. In many instances where this has been tried, striking coincidental messages have been received, partly through one medium and partly through another. They thus tend to confirm each other, and show that the same spirit intelligence is active and manifesting through both mediums at the same time almost, or one directly after the other. How to enter trance by yourself. In order to induce trance spontaneously in yourself, you should proceed more or less as follows. Begin by gazing for some time at a bright object, such as a reflected light coming from a mirror, crystal ball, etc. This will tend to tire the eyes and nerves slightly, and bring about a dazed condition, which is usually the beginning of trance. While looking at the bright object, breathe deeply and regularly through the nose and from the diaphragm, as explained before in Chapter 6. You must not let this distract your attention, however, as all the bodily processes should be unconscious. If you have already practiced deep breathing, as before explained, you should by this time be so far advanced that you can do so at will without consciously thinking of it. While looking at the bright object, do not concentrate or think of anything in particular beyond keeping yourself conscious and remembering all the time that you are yourself, that you are not leaving your body, and that you are not going to become totally unconscious. During this process, the room should be as quiet as possible, though some monotonous sound, such as the ticking of a large clock, might assist matters. Do not listen to this consciously, however. Abolish all feelings of fear and all anxiety, as such mental states will effectually prevent you from entering the trance condition. Let yourself go, and develop as far as possible. Symptoms of early trance mediumship. You must not imagine that the beginnings of your mediumship will be either profitable or pleasant, because they probably will not be. Nearly all successful mediums will tell you that they have passed through a period, at the beginning of their mediumship, when they thought themselves in danger, and believed that their minds were being impaired for the time being. This, however, passes off as you progress, provided that you progress along the right road at the beginning of your mediumship, and this you should endeavor in every way to do. If you can consult an experienced medium, or, still better, if you can sit with him during your development, or induce him to be present during your psychic unfoldment, things will be far easier for you and far safer than they would be otherwise. The oncoming of trance is often signified by certain physical and psychical manifestations, which must not alarm you when they appear, as they sometimes but not always do. Hiccoughs, sudden and spasmodic pains and cramps, a feeling of all-goneness, nausea, flashes of light, or the sensation of faintness and that everything is turning black before you. These are a few of the symptoms which you are liable to experience during your early development, and, though they may not be pleasant, you had better be warned of them in advance, and not be alarmed when they appear. Sometimes, however, none of these signs are manifest, only a delightful sensation of falling asleep upon a bed of roses. In these cases, the psychic has developed himself properly and systematically, and his guides or controls are also wise and helpful. These are the fortunate but unhappily rare cases, but it is hoped that, by following the advice given in this book, many more will be enabled to develop in this wholesome manner. The 3 rules to follow. There are 3 chief and most essential factors to be considered. 1. Your mental and physical health must be quite up to the standard. If you are depleted, exhausted, or run down physically, if you are suffering from any disease, or if, on the other hand, you are full of fear, apprehension, and doubts, or if anger and similar thoughts rage in your soul, you may anticipate a difficult time in your development and unpleasant experiences throughout that slow process. 2. You should be careful to keep your self-consciousness active and alert when entering trance. Do not give yourself up completely, or allow the mind to become a blank at first. Give yourself up in every other way but this. You must always keep in the background of your mind the thought, I am so-and-so, your name. I will remain in my body. I am strength and power. I will not be influenced against my will by forces other than good. I can always return to myself when I want to. These and similar suggestions you must give to yourself, and hold them in your mind as a central point of force while entering trance, even while allowing yourself to become passive in every other way. If you do this, you will avoid a great deal of difficulty and danger. 3. If you can in any way assure yourself that you have a band of spirits or controls on the other side who are ready and willing to help you, this would mean much. A good medium or clairvoyant could probably tell you whether this is the case, and the nature of the intelligences who are trying to influence and act upon you. If these are described as evil, you had best postpone your development until this condition changes. If, on the contrary, they are described as good and helpful, you may proceed, subject to the above precautions and advice. Important conditions to be fulfilled. It is important to have a plentiful supply of fresh air in the room when entering trance, and after you are in that condition. Also, the light should be so regulated as to affect you most agreeably. This may be semi-darkness, though many trance mediums develop in full light. Soft music may be found beneficial in some cases, though not in all. You should have everything ready to hand, such as pencils, paper, etc., before you enter the trance condition. During the trance state, you will probably be more or less sensitive to objects placed in your hands. That is, you will be enabled not only to psychometrize them, but in connection with the objects given you, you will get spirit messages and information concerning the individuals to whom they formerly belonged. All objects of this character carry the aura or influence of the person with whom they have come into contact, and for this reason, those objects which have been next the skin are the best for this purpose. Gloves, headbands, etc. are especially valuable. These should be wrapped, as before explained, in oil silk, and they should be handled as little as possible after the death of the person to whom they belonged. Developing exercises. A very good practice in developing trance mediumship in yourself is to cultivate the habit of analyzing your own falling asleep process. Try to catch yourself as you fall asleep, and hold on to yourself when in this semi-sleeping condition as long as you can before finally dropping off to slumber. This you will find very difficult at first, but it can be mastered more or less in time. If you can succeed in catching yourself in this manner when nearly asleep, and retaining a certain degree of conscious control, you may rest assured that you will not only be a good trance medium, but that you will be able to protect yourself while in the trance state, and that harm can hardly come to you when in this condition. This is a very excellent practice, and has given many psychics that power over themselves which they formerly lacked. Spiritual repose is essential for the trance medium who would develop simply, harmoniously, into practical and wise mediumship. In this manner you are said to come in tune or harmony with the great cosmic currents of truth and wisdom which flow hither and thither in our world, and to and fro from the spiritual source of love, wisdom, and intelligence. Once get into harmony with this stream, and your progress, not only as a medium, but as a supreme psychic, is assured. End of Chapter 20.
Chapter 21. Recorded by Monica Harris. Inspirational Speaking and Test Messages. Inspirational speaking depends partly upon the activity of your own subconscious mind, and partly upon the amount of help you receive from the spirit world. In speaking before public audiences for the first few times, you had best think over what you are to say and prepare your talk a little in advance. Then depend upon the help and inspiration you receive for the elaboration of these notes which you have made. As you progress, you will find that less and less of this preparation is necessary, and after a time you will be enabled to dispense with it altogether, and know nothing more of the subject of your discourse than the mere title. On the rostrum. When on the rostrum, you can close your eyes and the discourse, more or less eloquent, will flow from your lips. When you are still more advanced, you will be enabled to allow persons in the audience to choose subjects, and you will then be able to talk upon these at great length, and often with a profundity of knowledge and beauty of style which surprises not only yourself, but your auditors. Many of the best and most profound object lessons and instructions have been received in this manner, and much of the philosophy of spiritualism has been propounded and explained in this way. Test messages are of a somewhat different order and are given in a different manner. They relate to persons in the audience or to objects brought by those persons, and the information concerns not an abstract subject or theme, but individuals connected with the person to whom the message is given. It concerns spiritual personalities more directly than spiritual truth, and though both may have their origin in friendly helpers, they are nevertheless given for different purposes and in a different manner. How to begin? A very good way to begin training both for inspirational speaking and test messages is the following, which Dr. R.R. Schleusner, an able trance and test medium, personally followed in his development, and which he found gave most satisfactory results. In writing of this, Dr. Schleusner says, quote, "First of all, I ask someone in the audience to speak to me a set or formal sentence, such as, 'Doctor, help me,' or 'Doctor, reach me.' From this I receive certain impressions which I analyze somewhat as follows. 1. I can tell from the sound of the voice whether it is harsh and grating or whether it is soft, gentle, and harmonious, and from this the character of the speaker may be more or less diagnosed. Also the voice will tell me whether the person is nervous and irritable or self-contained and controlled, whether the person is angry or is skeptical and merely asking for a test. Further, the voice will tell me whether the person is weak or strong, positive or negative, sensitive or the reverse. These are the physical properties of the voice, so to speak, and from them I gather certain information more or less instantaneously and subconsciously as to the sitter and his attitude. Colors and auras. Number 2. In addition to this, I receive, in connection with his voice, certain psychic impressions. These take the form of auras or colors, drawn up in cloudy, pillar-like forms. These colors I interpret symbolically, according to the interpretation outlined in the chapter devoted to color and its interpretation. Thus, if I see before me a dirty slate gray, I say that the conditions before me are at present very unfavorable and depressing. And if just beyond this I see a yellowish golden rim, I state that the immediate future prospects will be much brighter and better, and that the person in question may cheer up as better conditions are coming, etc. Besides this color, which is drawn up before me in this form, as the result of the physical vibration of the voice,
and which seems to be caused by it, I always see another series of colors and auras in another place, some distance from the first in space, which I compare with the former set and see whether or not they agree. After seeing the first set of colors, I close my eyes for a moment, then open them and look at the second set. If they are found to agree with one another, I know that my first impressions are correct, and I then state openly that such and such conditions are so. My own experience has been that if these two sets of auras agree with one another, those which are produced by the voice and those which are apparently shown me by my spirit guides, the diagnosis or psychic impression is correct, and I am very seldom wrong in my statement of the fact. Their interpretation. Let us go back for a moment to the impression received by the heavy laden gray color. Suppose this is the color seen. This indicates depression. Having arrived thus far, the question is how to get out of this condition. That is suggested partly by common sense. Having proposed this question to myself, I close my eyes and look at a different place in space. In this third place, I then see presented to my psychic sight a symbol. This symbol tells me how to escape from the present difficulty. After I have explained the symbol and interpreted it to the best of my ability, I then look back at the colors and see whether or not they have changed. If they have become brighter, then I know that this is the correct path to follow, and that good will result from the course of action advised. If there is no change, I state that things will continue for some time to come in this depressed condition, and that the best that can be done for the time being is to hope and work on patiently. How to increase your power. These auras, colors, and symbols may be impeded or shut off by certain psychic conditions on the part of the sensitive. For example, you may hold onto them too tightly, as it were, and this tenacious grasp for too long a time will have the effect of shutting them off altogether. You must learn to let go as soon as the symbol has been perceived or the color seen. As these colors are presented to you, you may, however, see a change going on, and in that case, you should watch it intently and see what the change may be. Thus, gray may change to white, as a sign of spirituality, and you can state that the person is becoming more spiritual and changing his point of view in life, clinging to his ideals, etc., and that if he continues to do so, success will reward him. If you see tinges of golden yellow, you may be sure that the individual in question is cultivating his intellect, and that he is independent in thought and a more or less clever intellectual person. Getting help from spirit guides. In addition to these colors and symbols, other phenomena may occur. Thus, in my own case, I always see my guides who stand by my side telling me what to say. If I speak aloud just what they tell me, it is usually correct. If I endeavor to elaborate or extend it, it is often wrong. This is an error which should be avoided. Thus, they may say 3. This may mean 3 minutes, 3 hours, 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, etc. At the time I hear the figure, I do not know what its meaning is. I therefore say to the person receiving the message, my guides say to me 3, and I then wait for further information. As explained in the lesson on symbolism, the difference between the two consists in distinction between impression and expression. I receive the impression correctly, but must be careful not to give it wrong expression. What one should do, therefore, is to wait for further impressions before expressing anything. In such a case as the above, I would, after hearing the word 3 spoken, turn to my guide and ask what the 3 signified. On receiving an answer, I would state this also, and then go back for further information, etc. If you proceed in this manner, you will rarely go wrong. The more anxious you are to receive psychic impressions and to give tests, the more fluctuating or changing will your impressions be. The colors of the auras will keep changing, and often you will see them constantly varying around any object placed on your table. Whereas if you were in a calmer frame of mind, these colors would appear stationary. Endeavor, therefore, in every way possible, to control your apprehension and anxiety in giving public tests of this nature. Important rules to follow. One very good method in giving tests to the public is to endeavor to force your clairvoyant perception before asking aid of your spirit friends. Thus, suppose some member of the audience asks the question, "How is my mother?" Instead of waiting for a direct impression, in this case, I should say in reply to this, "I will first try to find your mother and describe her. If I can do this, I will proceed with the test." This is far more satisfactory both to the speaker and to yourself. I now force myself, so to speak, clairvoyantly, and generally, in a few moments, the form of a lady arises before me which I describe to the speaker in as much detail as possible, giving also her surroundings and the description of any other persons I see with her at the time. If this description is incorrect and not recognized, I then ask whether the description suits any other persons known to the speaker, any person through whom the mother might be reached. If they reply in the affirmative, I then endeavor to find the mother clairvoyantly, and if I cannot do this, I ask my guides to give me any information they can regarding her, without this vision. If, on the other hand, the test is not recognized, I drop it and proceed to another case, as I know that I can get nothing definite for this individual. Instances of this character are, however, very rare, amounting probably to not more than 5% of the tests I give in public. How to receive impressions. In all inspirational and test messages, you should throw yourself as completely as possible upon your spirit friends after you have once asked their assistance, and should be as responsive as you can. Do not wait for them to hammer any impression into your head before you state what it is, but hold yourself rather in the attitude of an empty vessel, and imagine a funnel in the top of your head into which ideas and impressions of all kinds are being poured. As they enter your mental and psychic life, you should interpret and express them as best you can. End quote. The foregoing is an exact account of Dr. Schleusner's method of delivering public tests, a careful study of which will doubtless prove helpful to the earnest student, and, I believe, will result in a corresponding degree of development in all like cases. End of Chapter 21.
Chapter 22 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Recording by Cynthia Sheeler. Chapter 22. More and Less Developed Spirits. Inasmuch as we are said to be spirits here and now, just as much as we ever will be, we should begin the course of progressive development here in this life, which we intend to follow later. Anything we learn here will doubtless help us in any future development, whatever that may be. Wisdom, knowledge, understanding, sympathy, and penetration of perception will all help, assist, and advance us, no matter what world we may inhabit or whatever its nature may be. This being the case, we should endeavor to develop our own inner nature here and now, as suggested especially in the chapter on self and soul culture. And we should continue this so far as lies within our power, even after we have crossed the great divide. Why strangers often communicate. Just as there are all kinds of characters and natures in this life, so there are said to be individuals of all kinds in the next. And the unfortunate part of it is that many of those who can most easily come back and communicate are those on the lowest rung of the ladder, those who are the most earthbound and belong to the lowest strata of society. They are nearer the earth than more advanced spirits, more in sympathy with it and its vibrations, and their character, being more earthly, is naturally more open to receive and send messages than those who, when alive, had less sympathy with the earth and felt less bound to it. It is for this reason that strangers often communicate with us more easily than our nearest and dearest, than our friends or relatives. The latter may feel for and with us most keenly, and may long to communicate, but often obstacles hitherto undreamed of may prevent them from doing so. They then find for the first time, and to their astonishment, that the difficulties of communication are so great that they are unable to send messages, however much they may desire to do so, and even if they can find a medium suitable to receive them. The conditions for communication. You, on your side, may be receptive to these conditions, and again you may be unfitted to sense anything of the kind. The combination of circumstances for the transmission of spirit messages is rare, and in order for these messages to be clear, as we should desire them, there must be an effort both on this side and on the other, made at the same moment. Also, there must be the medium. As this combination is naturally lacking in the majority of cases, you can see why it is that authentic cases of spirit return are, comparatively speaking, so rare, and why it is that more persons do not come back. No doubt you have often heard the objection that if spiritualism were true, out of all the millions of people who have died wishing to communicate, there must be many thousands who could return directly and state clearly what they wish to send. What we have said above will explain the reason why this is not the case. The ability to transmit a message from the other side may be as rare as the ability to receive it on this side. Good communicators may be as rare as good artists, painters, or sculptors. It may be a special faculty which we have to develop, and just as uneducated and ignorant persons often possess extraordinary gifts and talents in certain directions, for no reason we can see, just so certain individuals may become good mediums or communicators after they have passed over, simply by reason of their psychic constitution or makeup. The question of the difficulties of communication will be found fully discussed in Chapter 24. Why low or evil spirits communicate. It is because of all this that we often reach or come into contact with persons of a low order in spirit communications. Mediums believe that there are tramps and hobos on the other side just as much as there are in this life. By nature and by instinct, they remain the same, and they have to be gradually educated and trained in order to outgrow their natural instincts. And just as these tramps and hobos would be insulting and often disgusting in this life, and would swear, curse, and do other things unsuitable for the family circle were they introduced into it, just so they do the same things when they communicate and get once more into the earth atmosphere. These are the characters who also harm mediums unconsciously by rough handling, so to speak, and by damaging the delicate nervous organism upon which they operate when sending messages. The best and safest way to guard against personalities of this character, we are told, is to call to your aid spirit controls, guides, or advisors who can assist you from the other side, by arguing with such personalities and by removing them from your aura more or less forcibly should the occasion demand it. There are many cases on record in which more gentle measures did not bring about the required result, and according to accounts received, very forcible methods had to be resorted to in order to eject these strangers before peace and harmony were finally restored. High spirits and their helpful messages. When spirits of a higher order come, all this is reversed. You then come into contact with spiritual natures, and help, comfort, sympathy, and sound advice are given. When once you are assured of the assistance and cooperation of one or more individuals of this character, your time of tribulation as a medium is more or less over, and thenceforward you may depend upon steady and harmonious progression and advancement in your mediumship. You must be careful, however, as to how you receive messages claiming to come from exalted personages, as great names will often be given when the individuals in question are not there at all. This may be due at times to accident and misunderstanding, but there is also evidence, unfortunately, that lying spirits will resort to this stratagem to gain your confidence. You should, in this case, rely on your own common sense and judgment, and insist upon proof of identity and direct evidence before you believe that the individual in question is really there. Guardian spirits. There is one sect or division of spirits whose office and general work and interest is particularly helpful to mortals, and that is the so-called guardian angels or guides, who help govern and advise friends of theirs still in the body. The sympathy and counsel offered by these guardian spirits is at times very great. These spirits are said sometimes to prevent accident, suicide, and even murder by their kindly help and assistance. It is one of the most beautiful and inspiring thoughts in the spiritualistic philosophy to believe that those we love are constantly about, helping and cheering us along our hard and narrow way, and that they see our trials and tribulations and share them with us, just as they did on earth. We must feel, too, that they are preparing a place for us, and that when it comes time to solve the great mystery, we shall find helpful and loving assistance, instead of a foreign land into which we shall then enter. Who make the best communicators? Those who possess a simple, open, candid, childlike nature are doubtless those who make the best communicators, other things being equal. It is because of this that Indians who lived close to nature so constantly communicate and act as guides, and doubtless for the same reason, Negroes are very psychic and receive many psychic phenomena. There is a great deal of evidence also, as we know, to show us that animals perceive spirits and psychic manifestations, and that they also sense phenomena more keenly than human beings. Between animals and ourselves, there is doubtless a link which unites us all into one conscious whole, this being the life of the universe which runs through every sentient thing. It is not uncommon for spirits to return at seances and seek the prayers or the help of the living. They express themselves as being in trouble and as requiring assistance before they can free themselves and proceed on their way. This is doubtless an important mission to fulfill, and when any wandering and distressed spirit makes itself manifest in this way, it should certainly be assisted in every way possible in the fulfillment of its desire and the discharge of its burden. Many cases of so-called haunted houses doubtless exist because of the persistent inability of the returning spirit to make anyone present see its wants and attend to them. Were a good psychic or medium introduced into such a house, who could get into communication with the returning spirit, and when communication had been established, help it, there is no doubt that the haunting would cease, and the returning spirit would be greatly helped in its progress and advancement. Haunted houses and pacts. All this is especially important in those cases of so-called pacts, where an agreement is made before death to appear afterwards, if that be possible. Many cases of this character are on record, and whenever such an agreement is made, it is most important that the living person on earth should fulfill his part towards the fulfillment of such a plan. By doing so, he may assist to an extent he perhaps does not realize in freeing the spirit's mind from earthly ties and conditions. Possibly unconscious messages. In considering this question of returning spirits, one final and important fact must not be lost sight of, and that is that messages may often be given through a medium or directly, of which the spirit himself may be totally unconscious. He may think or dream or visualize a certain thought or message, and this may be reached or sensed by the medium, and given forth as a conscious and intentional message. The reverse of this, however, is true. The mind of the discarnate spirit has been read by the medium in trance. His mental pocket has been picked, and he has given nothing voluntarily. Further, his thoughts may have been reflected upon a sort of psychic mirror or atmosphere, and they're seen and interpreted by the psychic. This, however, is a difficult question which will be discussed in a later chapter. For the present, it should be borne in mind that all messages given by mediums need not necessarily be direct or intentional. They may merely have been obtained indirectly from the person in question, and would not be at all the message he would send were he aware of the fact that he was transmitting one. It is because of this fact that many of the messages appear to us so trivial and inconsequential. End of chapter 22. Recorded by Cynthia Sheeler. Website cynthiasheeler.icanvoice.com.
Chapter 23 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Recording by Pamela Krantz. Obsession and Insanity. In this chapter I desire to place before the reader in a fair and clear manner facts which are too often neglected by spiritualists, but which those who develop or become mediums are apt to find out to their cost later in their development, unless they are aware of the facts at the beginning. Truth is always best, and it is accordingly best for the student to know the dangers and difficulties attendant upon spiritualism as well as the bright side. We do not wish to alarm or divert from interest any student by this and the following chapters. Precisely the reverse. But inasmuch as forewarned is forearmed, the student should be familiar with all the possible risks he is running, as there are such risks if he does not develop his mediumistic power systematically and along the right lines, as so often pointed out before in this book. The reality of spirit obsession. As we saw in the last chapter, it is often easier for the low and less developed spirits to come in touch with us than those more highly developed, and this is especially the case where mediumistic development has not been such as to bring the student in touch with the higher forces and intelligences. Modern science does not accept the doctrine of spirit obsession as true, claiming that the cases of so-called spirit influence are really only cases of diseased mind and body, requiring for their cure proper medical attention. Experienced spiritualists, however, know that while many cases of apparent obsession may be accounted for in this manner, there are also cases of real influence coming from less developed, disembodied spirits, and as great a psychologist as Professor William James said shortly before his death, "The refusal of modern enlightenment to treat possession as a hypothesis to be spoken of as even possible in spite of the massive human tradition based on concrete experience in its favor, has always seemed to me a curious example of the power of fashion in things scientific. That the demon theory, not necessarily a devil theory, will have its innings again is to my mind absolutely certain. One has to be scientific indeed to be blind and ignorant enough not to suspect any such possibility. Dr. L. Navias, after an exhaustive study of the cases of demon possession in China, and after an examination of contrary theories, stated his conclusion that genuine cases of obsession were to be found, and that they could not be accounted for by any other theory satisfactorily. Examples of obsession. Take again the case recorded by Dr. J. Godfrey Roper in his Dangers of Spiritualism. He gives the case of a friend of his, M., who, after attempting automatic writing and obtaining it successfully, was unable to leave off the practice when he desired to. Even at night, when retiring to rest, M. had habitually placed paper and pencil by his bedside, in order to be able to write at once when summoned to do so, and he had frequently been awakened from his sleep for this purpose, much to the detriment, of course, of his mental and physical health. After this there had come a still further development of the mystical power of writing. The pencil, too, had been discarded, and M. had begun to trace the writing with his finger in the air. He could thus, it appears, write out a message at some length, and was fully able to read it afterwards, just as though there was a piece of paper suspended in the air. Things had thus gone on for many months, when M. at last awakened to the fact that a great transformation was passing over his moral and intellectual nature, and that some other mind had permeated his entire being, and he was now conscious that he was ceasing to think his own thoughts. In short, there could not be any doubt that fetters were being woven around him, which he was growing daily more incapable of breaking. The condition of servility and submission which the control at first effected was now thrown off, and the latter showed signs of absolute power. No treatment, either hypnotic or medical, had the slightest influence upon the strange phenomenon, and M. had now given up all hope from this quarter. Some of the authorities whom he had consulted did not believe in obsession or possession. Others ascribed it to hysteria and fixed ideas. Help there was none. Dr. Roper goes on. Its dangers. I tried to argue with the personality and prove to him that he was merely a subconscious product on the part of M. When I persisted in denying the presence of a personality other than and different from that of M., a very frenzy seemed to shake the frame of M., and words of the most abusive kind were leveled at me. "What fools you are," it exclaimed, "to tamper with things you do not understand, to facilitate the invasion of spirits and then to deny that they exist, to play with hell fire and then be surprised that it hurts and burns. I challenge you to propose any kind of experiment to test my utter and entire independence of the person of this idiot, with whom I can do absolutely as I please. See how I can handle him and ill-treat him. I am now beating and hurting him, and he can do nothing to defend himself." With this there appeared red spots in different parts of M.'s face, and he groaned as if in physical pain. Upon this I replied that I should accept the notion of an independent intelligence, if it could be shown to be a fact and could be clearly demonstrated. This he promised to do. Many similar cases can be found in this author's works. particularly modern spiritualism and the supreme problem, and though they are doubtless colored to some extent by the author's religious prejudices, they are nevertheless valuable as records or human documents and should be studied as much. There are other spiritualists who have written much on this subject of spirit obsession, as for instance Dr. J. M. Peebles, whose work, The Demonism of the Ages, or Spirit Obsessions, should be read by all interested in spiritualism. Many cases are given in this work. How Obsessing Spirits Gain Control. Madame Anita Silvani, who is an experienced and cautious medium, makes the following wise statements concerning the possibilities of obsession in those roughly or over hastily developed. As to the evils experienced by some persons who have sat in circles for development or for the manifestation of psychic power, I would say that the whole theory of magnetic control rests upon a condition of mutual receptivity being established between the members of a circle, but few reflect that the blending of magnetisms with those who form the spirit side of that circle is no less a part of the process, and that without the aid of the magnetism of the sitters present, nothing belonging to the spirit side of life would be obtained. Now, in forming a circle, how are you to ensure absolute freedom from the influence of the low or evil, earthbound spirits who crowd the streets of a large city? The magnetic aura created by the circle hangs in a cloud around it and draws spirits toward it. Even as a magnet draws iron and steel and everything bright and rusty, useful tools and dangerous weapons will be attracted by the powerful magnet. Poisoned magnetism. If you once admit that the aura of a pure and good person can, under certain conditions, be poisoned by absorbing the tainted mixture from a mixed circle of all sorts of mortals and spirits, you also admit that the good persons can carry home with them a sufficient portion of that poisoned magnetism to form the nucleus of a magnetic state, congenial to the low and depraved spirits, and into which any of them can enter a second time without the aid of the circle. For this reason we are opposed to mixed or miscellaneous circles, especially when sitters are not sincere and known to one another. We believe that possession is not always evil, and indeed it is often necessary. But it is the continued control of a highly sensitive medium which does the harm by absorbing his finer life essence. An earthbound spirit is like one who belongs to neither earth nor heaven nor Gehenna. He has lost his hold on the earth life, and has not yet attained to the spirit world. He lives in his astral body, and having nothing of his own, must borrow from those both above and below him on the ladder of development. Obsession versus mediumship. Mediumship is necessary. Without it there would be no means of knowledge, no instruments through which to study the psychic plane. But mediumship, in exact proportion to the magnetic powers it confers, becomes a greater and ever greater source of danger the further its development is carried, unless the control of those powers can be handled with a firm hand, and understood in all its aspects. Knowledge is the best safeguard, and knowledge will be best obtained by those who can study all the conditions of psychic development. It is said that there are two forms of magnetism, the astral and the physical. The fundamental difference between them is due to the different conditions under which the astral plane and the physical plane function. How spirits influence us. It must not be thought, however, that all I have said on obsession relates entirely to spiritualism or to development in circles or in private. We live all the time in a spiritual world as well as in a material one, and hence are open to the possibilities of obsession or influence, both good or bad, and many show in daily life the fact that this influence is strong, for or against. Invisible intelligences are said to be with us much of the time, some urging us on to false and wrong deeds, others helping and encouraging us in actions of kindness, sympathy, and benevolence. It is our duty to get in touch with the latter as much as possible, and then we shall receive inspiration and enlightenment from higher sources than any at present about us. The difficulty is to know how to do this without risk, for, as St. Paul said, we must try the spirits, and endeavor to prove to our own satisfaction whether they are good or bad. There are various types of obsession, but for our present purposes we shall omit many of the odd and exceptional phases, such as vampires, which will be discussed later on in this book, and shall speak only of the ordinary type of spiritistic obsession. The magnetic link. The body and mind are doubtless connected by a sort of magnetic link. The mind and the physical body are connected by means of a fluidic or etheric body, in shape the double of the physical body. It is owing to the fact that this body becomes detached from the physical frame at times, that many of the phenomena of obsession and insanity occur. The lines of force are broken, and the etheric body becomes first of all loosened inside the physical body, and then separated more or less altogether from it, without the wish of the subject, who may even be altogether unconscious of the process, and not know what is going on within him. He only experiences the resultant phenomena, and it is for this reason that he does not know what method or course of treatment to pursue in order to get better or become cured. All ordinary treatment is, for this reason, useless. Medical and physiological treatment, for the reason that it acts only on the physical body, not on the mind, and hypnotic or other psychological treatment is almost equally useless, for the reason that it acts on the mind without reaching the physical body. Any form of treatment which really cures must aim to act upon the etheric link or connection between mind and body, and to act upon it in such a way that it will become readjusted both to the mind and body, and this once accomplished, the mind will be restored to its condition of health and sanity. One of the chief things to do, therefore, is to act upon this magnetic link and draw back the etheric body into the physical. We know that anesthetics of all kinds tend to drive out or disconnect the etheric from the physical body, and it is possible that some day in the future science may discover a drug which will have the reverse effect, of driving or drawing back the etheric into the physical body. When this has been discovered, it will doubtless be the means of curing many cases of insanity at present held incurable. For the present, inasmuch as this drug has never been discovered, we must resort to magnetic and mesmeric treatment and other methods of cure, to be enumerated more fully later on in this chapter. Early symptoms of obsession. First of all, let us consider some of the typical symptoms of obsession when they occur. One of the primary things which will be noticed, probably, will be that the patient will be unable to sleep properly. He suffers from insomnia, coupled with restlessness and irritability. Soon after this he begins to experience a dull ache or pain at the base of the brain, sometimes at the base of the spine also. These spots will be tender to the touch. A general debilitated or run-down nervous condition will be present, perhaps unnoticed until attention be drawn to the fact. If the subject has been practicing automatic writing, let us say, he will begin to have a more or less persistent desire to write. This will keep pressing him forward and urging him to try what he can get with pencil or planchette. Thoughts seem put into his head, ideas, impressions, and impulses which urge him to perform certain actions or do certain things. These will increase in intensity and frequence. Danger signals. From this point onward, great caution should be used, as the danger point or dividing of the ways has now been reached. A careful student of the occult might point out that the symptoms mentioned above and in the first chapter are alarmingly similar to those in the early stages of some types of insanity. This is true. I described them earlier in this book, be it understood, not as desirable symptoms, but as those which are likely to appear, and for which the student should be on the lookout. The facts should be placed before him, and when he is in possession of the knowledge concerning them, he will know how best to meet them, if he observes such symptoms. We see, therefore, the importance of careful and systematic development in the cultivation of mediumship, as I have so often pointed out before in this book. After the above stage has been reached, it is probable that the student, who is on the wrong road, will hear words as though inside his head, or externally in space, or possibly in his solar plexus, though this is more rare. Or the phenomena may take the visual turn, in which case the patient will see things, mostly of an unpleasant nature, such as snakes, devils, or monstrous or grotesque living objects. Thenceforward unfavorable symptoms will probably develop rapidly until a patient is completely obsessed and under control. The line to be pursued in cases of this character is twofold: first, prevention; second, cure. Prevention of obsession. Prevention. Sound physical health is essential for all wholesome spiritual and mediumistic advancement, and if the patient is sick or ill, and especially if run down or depleted nervously, he should stop all mediumistic practices until he is again restored to health. Plenty of outdoor exercise of as rugged a nature as possible would do wonders in cases of this character. Fresh air, both day and night, is essential. Tea, coffee, and alcohol should be avoided. Plenty of milk should be drunk by the patient, as this both restores and builds up the nervous system in a way that nothing else can. Above all, plenty of sleep must be obtained, and no matter whether the patient desires 10 hours or more at night, this should be allowed, and plenty of rest at all other times. This is very essential at this stage of the proceedings. The mental and spiritual health must be maintained equally with the physical. Your critical judgment and common sense must be exercised now, as always, both in judging the messages received and in the general conduct of life. Do not believe everything which is told you, as there are many lying and deceiving intelligences as well as useful and good ones. Above all, do not act upon or obey messages which do not strongly appeal to your own good sense and worldly judgment. If you keep up your mediumistic practices, sit only a short time each day, not more than 15 or 20 minutes at the longest, and if possible at the same time each day. These two rules, as before pointed out, are very important. Never allow yourself to continue beyond the time limit you have set yourself, no matter how interesting the communications may be, but say in a firm, loud voice, "We must stop now," or "I will sit again at the same time tomorrow for the continuation of the message." You should then discontinue the writing. Important warnings and precautions. Never go inside your own head and examine its processes or introspect for too long a time. The wonders of brain and thought may appeal to your imagination, but never let them influence you or cause you to turn your thoughts inward in the attempt to solve them. If you do, it is sure to end disastrously, and there is no more reason why you should be conscious of your thinking apparatus than of your digestive or circulatory apparatus, which is equally mysterious and wonderful. Let them go on by themselves without thinking anything about them, but using them rather as instruments for your life purposes. Always keep an interest in external things and live, as it were, outside your head, in the outer world all the time. Become interested in matter-of-fact and worldly objects and interests, as this will tend to distract your mind from yourself and restore you to a condition of normal, healthy-mindedness. Cultivate a sense of humor, and never take yourself or your mediumship so seriously that you cannot see the humorous side of a situation when it may arise. Endeavor to harden the inner self, so to say, and focus and concentrate it at a given point which is under your conscious volition and control. Keep the center of consciousness always intact, and be sure that the center is yourself. Do not focus either the sight or the interest on external images or impressions when these become persistent. When this is the case, force yourself to banish them by an effort of will, and by deliberately turning the attention into other more practical directions. Further advice. When dropping to sleep, always keep your mind centered on yourself, and never allow yourself any flights of imagination, and never wonder what is going on or endeavor to catch yourself falling asleep, as you might with safety do at other times. Value sleep and look upon it as a kindly friend. Even those who are seriously obsessed are safe when they are asleep, and no matter how terrifying their daily experiences, voices or visions, may be, they very rarely have unpleasant or terrifying dreams. Sleep is the resting time of the soul, and if the spirit is en rapport with itself, as it should be, it will be protected from all external influences during the hours of sleep. Cultivate your own force of will and self-possession. If the emotional nature is too intense, this should by all means be calmed down, especially before going to sleep. A prolonged warm bath will have a very good effect in such cases. One other preventative practice will be found very useful. It is this: seated in a dark room, concentrate your will upon the outer limits of your aura. That is the auric egg, which was described in the chapter on the aura. By proper concentration and practice you will be enabled to harden or toughen the outer shell, as it were, of this auric egg, rendering it impervious to extraneous psychic or spiritual influences. This you should always practice before dropping off to sleep. Those who have developed this power in a proper and adequate manner are absolutely impervious to any evil or malign influences from without. The cure of obsession. Cure. Supposing now that you have not taken these precautions in time, and that you have become actually obsessed for the time being, or that you meet one who is unfortunate enough to be in that condition. What is to be done? The advice which was given under the last heading should be followed here to some extent. The physical health should be built up by all means in your power. Sleep is absolutely essential, and as much of it must be secured as possible. It may be necessary even to resort to sleeping draughts or powders in order to secure the necessary sleep. These should be prescribed by your regular physician, however. While drugs are doubtless harmful, bromide and similar medicines can be taken with benefit at such a time, since the evil effects of the drug are more than counterbalanced by the benefits derived by mind and spirit. Alcohol must be discontinued at once and a milk diet substituted. You must impress upon the patient, for such he is now, that no one can help him beyond a certain limited point. He must help himself. The cure must come from within rather than from without. How to use the mind. Distract his mind by all possible methods, so as to make it objective instead of introspective. Do not let him go inside his head for a moment to listen to the voices, or to see the visions which float before him, but immediately anything of the kind occurs, distract his attention and interest him in something which is going on about him, and of as dramatic a nature as possible, so as to insure attention. Do not let him go inside his head, for the more he lives within himself, the more difficult will he be to cure. You must teach him to disregard or to deny the voices or impressions which insistently come to him. If they flatter him and tell him to do certain things, teach him that these voices are evil and lying, and are not to be trusted, for if they were otherwise he would not be in his present condition. Never imagine for a moment that an obsessed person is illogical or is not open to reason. His reasoning faculties are often keenly alert, and have often to be appealed to effect a cure. These mental devices are very important, though they do not, as before said, go to the root of the matter. Diagnosis and treatment. Clairvoyant diagnosis is very valuable, and a trained clairvoyant can sometimes see the obsessing spirits and describe them. When this is the case, the problem of cure becomes more real and more apparent. If the patient believes in the efficacy of prayer, this is doubtless a potent method of cure. The religious nature is one of the most fundamental sides of our character, and is a factor which is capable of exerting an immense pressure when properly brought to bear. Encourage the patient, therefore, to pray, if he is at all of a religious turn of mind. Magnetic treatment, such as passes, etc., is often very valuable and will assist in restoring the patient to health, by acting upon the etheric body direct, as before explained. Combined with suggestion, this is one of the most potent weapons that can be used in our present state of knowledge. By these methods also we can in some cases toughen the outer protective auric shell, if the patient is unable to direct his mind sufficiently to do this himself. By proper striving, however, he will soon place himself in the direction of the great healing cosmic currents, and when once he has done so, will begin to improve immediately and make rapid progress. Spiritual treatment. The most important remedial measure must now be described, inasmuch as the obsessing intelligences are spirits, usually of an evil or lying nature, though they may be only ignorant or bungling, who have wrecked the medium's nervous mechanism, through their ignorance of how to operate it. They are capable of being reached and removed by other spirits. That is, we should approach them not from the physical or even the mental plane, but from the spirit side of life. One of the best ways to do this is to secure the services of a reliable trance or clairvoyant medium, who in the mediumistic condition is capable of discerning the spirits and influencing the patient. An experienced medium of this character has with him certain guides or controls who are helpful and friendly. These guides, if called upon, will assist by arguing with, or, if necessary, forcefully removing the obsessing intelligences who are influencing the psychic. The case should be explained to the medium's guides when the latter is in trance, and their assistance asked. They will then undertake to remove the obsessing spirits, and will often succeed in doing so after a few trials, though in some instances they are unable to persuade or induce the obsessing spirits to leave, and are not powerful enough to enforce their removal. This, however, is the most potent and effectual method which we know at present, and should be employed whenever possible. If a medium of this character is unavailable, then a second person should speak to the obsessing intelligences direct, and reason with them as he would with a human being, pointing out to them the uselessness of the proceeding, the injury they are doing the medium, the harm to themselves, etc. It is rare indeed that such measures, properly applied and coupled with the mental and physical treatment described above, will fail to remove the influences which are at work. The brighter side of the subject. I have described fully and freely the seamy side of spiritualism and its possible dangers. The student must not be discouraged, however, from this black outlook. The dangers exist, truly, but they also exist in other lines of experimental research, and many lives have been lost in attempts to perfect some system of medicine or some antidote for poison which today we use with safety. It is the same here. Properly, carefully, and systematically developed, mediumship should present none of these dangers or difficulties, but should, on the contrary, bring the student into touch with higher planes of thought and activity, and enable him to approach the more angelic sphere of being, as by careless or wrong development he will as surely come in contact with spirits of the opposite nature. For this reason I again urge the student to study and practice carefully and cautiously as he proceeds, so that none of these unpleasant or terrifying experiences may at any time come to him. End of Chapter 23. Obsession and Insanity. Recording by Pamela Krantz.
Chapter 24 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Chapter 24. Prayer, Concentration, and Silence. The subjects treated in this chapter will probably be of special value to the student after that immediately preceding it. We have already spoken of the value of prayer in certain cases, and it may be said that both silence and concentration, under certain conditions, will always prove of great value, not only in the cure of obsession, but at all other times when dark clouds loom up on the horizon. In order to secure the best results from these psychological processes, however, They should be practiced according to certain laws, and the reason for their operation should be thoroughly understood by the student. What the silence really signifies. What is called the silence in general New Thought philosophy is a peculiar psychic state into which the student enters in order to secure certain results. As the term implies, quiet or silence are necessary factors, but they are mere means to an end. Silence in itself would achieve nothing. It means that in this condition, thereby induced, certain practices may be followed which produce the desired results. Concentration is the focusing of the entire being at any given moment upon a central point of interest, either inward or outward as the case may be. It may be upon some object, or some inner thought or psychic condition. Concentration upon objects is usually employed as a mere outward exercise, to train the mind to act according to instructions, so to speak, so that when the time comes, it may be employed in useful and helpful psychic activity. The value of concentration. Concentration means power. The more we concentrate on anything, the more certain it is to be accomplished, and the better will the results be. Just as a number of streams meeting at a certain point will create a rushing, mighty current, so in the same manner will scattered psychic activity and forces, if brought to a common point, produce certain powerful results, which may be centered, or turned into one direction or into another. One of the chief practical uses of concentration is the use it may be put to hold or bind the self together. We should never let it be scattered in a variety of separate channels of expression, but rather concentrated into one single powerful unit. Just as the strands of a rope may become separated, so the mind may become disintegrated and lose its initial power. In this weakened condition, it can be acted upon by other minds and forces, just as the single strands of rope can be broken, but the whole rope would resist any strain put upon it. The mind, when concentrated and acting under proper direction and control, is similarly impervious to all outside influences which may not be desired, and at the same time is itself a powerful factor either for good or evil. Concentration exercises. A few simple exercises in concentration may here be given, which will be found useful not only in psychic development, but in every phase of life. 1. Read a page of some heavy technical book, the meaning of which is not at all clear to you. Reread the page with the determination to understand what it means. Read this over a number of times if necessary, never letting your will relax for a moment, but determined to understand the thought of the author. If you do this, you will, after a few readings, the number varying, be enabled to grasp fully what is meant. 2. Place a watch in front of you and look at the second hand until it has completed the circle marking the minute. During this process, never let your thoughts wander from the second hand for a moment. Concentrate upon it fully. You will probably find that your thoughts are wandering, and that you cannot even for the space of a minute fix them absolutely under your control. Practice this until you have succeeded in accomplishing it. 3. Call up before your mind's eye a picture of a certain living friend. Hold this image in front of you as long as possible, making the details in every way as clear as you can, by endeavoring to fill out mentally the color of the hair, of the eyes, the complexion, and any peculiar markings that you can remember. Now, when the face is vivid before your mind's eye, see whether you can discover any peculiarities in the face hitherto unknown to you. If you note anything of the kind, ascertain the next time you see this friend whether or not these impressions are correct. 4. Call up before your mental vision the face of some dead relative or friend. Concentrate upon it, holding it firmly before you in space. Study it closely, filling in all details as before. Finally, when you have held this vividly for a minute or so, without wavering in your attention, open your psychic or mental ears, so to speak, and see if you can receive any message from the person whose face is before you. This will be found a very useful practice, on occasion, at the beginning of your mediumship, and will enable you possibly to receive direct communications when you have tried in every other way and failed. You will not be able to do so, however, until you have mastered fully this faculty of concentration. The dynamic power of the mind. Having progressed so far, You may now concentrate upon certain mental or psychic processes, while willing or demanding that some return be made as a result of your volitional activity. Remember that every thought you send out into the universe attracts to itself others of a like nature, and ultimately returns to the sender with added power, just as a boomerang returns to the thrower. Altruistic thoughts, such as love, justice, forgiveness, etc., will therefore return to the owner and make him happier for having thought them. Evil and malevolent thoughts will, on the contrary, return and make the sender more unhappy and more innately evil in consequence. The path we travel, whether it be upward or downward, always gets easier as we proceed. We are helped along not only by the powers of good or darkness, but by our own thoughts and their results. Thoughts are things. No thought is ever annihilated, and there is evidence to show that thought can take material form on occasion, and influence, either for good or evil, those at a distance. This will be more fully explained, however, in subsequent chapters. The value of prayer. We must now say a few words on prayer, and its great value to one who sends out the prayer thought. There are many who believe that prayer is superstition, since they do not believe in a personal God who grants or answers prayers, but rather in an impersonal creative power which orders all things according to unvarying laws. Even on this theory, however, prayer, under certain conditions, is fully justified, for in the first place, as we have just seen, helpful and wholesome thoughts tend to bring their own reward. In the next place, prayer is an auto-suggestion of great value, and its influence upon the mental and physical life is frequently very great. In the third place, prayer will help and buoy you up by giving you added confidence and belief in your powers. In the fourth place, inasmuch as telepathy is a fact in nature, you may, while in that condition, reach the minds of other human beings, who can help you and will actually do so without knowing why. The many interesting cases which may be found of answers to prayers, bringing a material return, fully justify its use from that point of view. Fifth, you can doubtless reach by telepathy friends in the spirit life, who may be brought into more or less direct touch with you, during the prayerful condition of mind, which is certainly closely akin to certain phases of subjective mediumship. They may, in this manner, be made aware of your condition for the first time, and will then endeavor to help you. Sixth, by prayer you may bring yourself into harmony with the great cosmic currents of good, which, as before explained, are playing hither and thither upon our universe in much the same way as light, heat, gravitation, electricity, and other material forces play or act upon it and us. All these material factors must be taken into account, apart from the possibility that there is a receptive, loving, and protecting power in the world, which is capable of helping us in time of need. Prayer in obsession. In obsession cases particularly, prayer is of value, because of the relief from tension and the wholesome mental attitude induced. Just as a drowning man will clutch at a straw, so those who are in terrible distress will frequently resort to this practice, when they would not think of doing so at any other time, and in a sense they are justified in so doing. There is an old saying that man's extremity is God's opportunity. It may be that prayer, in the ordinary sense of the word, is not needed during an ordinary, healthy life, provided that it is lived in accordance with the laws of nature and according to its own highest mental and spiritual insight. At the same time, there may be occasions when it is justified and helpful, and certainly it is proved so in certain cases of difficulty and obsession. How prayer cures. The beneficial effects of prayer may be explained in many cases quite simply. As explained in the chapter devoted to the subconscious mind, certain groups of thoughts tend to become bound together, forming what is known as a complex. If this activity be wholesome, the result is beneficial, and in fact, all our educational processes depend upon this complex formation. On the other hand, these groups of thoughts may be harmful, in which case they tend to press upon the mind from beneath, in much the same way that physical tumors might press upon some healthy structure in the body, and impede its functional activity. The mind, therefore, becomes diseased by reason of this pressure, and will only resume its wholesome attitude when this pressure is removed. By means of hypnotic suggestion and spiritual treatment, the mind may be opened up and explored, and this "complex" found and removed. This once done, the mind is restored to its wholesome activity and the cure is complete. This is known in technical language as the "purging" treatment. As soon as the unwholesome load is removed, the mind is cured. Now, in prayer, when a full and free confession is made, this same purging process occurs. The mind is freed from its burden, and is consequently restored to health by its own inner nature. This being so, it may be seen that prayer, as such, is a real curative process, and in many types of obsession and similar cases, it may be employed effectually, as before said, as a therapeutic measure of great value in curing the sick mind. End of Chapter 24.
Chapter 25 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Recording by Libby Gone. Chapter 25. The Human Fluid. The human body is charged with a certain magnetism which differs from all other forms of magnetism and electricity in the world. All other forces of which we have knowledge are non-intelligent, and have to be guided and directed by mind or by some law, in order to bring about any definite or desired result. It is therefore meaningless to explain the continued and consecutive movements of the planchette board or any similar instrument by saying it is due to magnetism, or to electricity, or to any similar power. These are all blind forces, and must be directed, in order that any intelligent result may be obtained. The vital magnetism, which is present in the body, is also a blind force, but it is under the control of the subconscious mind, and under certain conditions, to be spoken of later, may be played upon or manipulated by external intelligences. In this way the various results are obtained. Nature and properties of the fluid. This vital magnetism appears to be fluidic or semi-fluidic in form, and capable of flowing from one organism into another. It is upon this principle that various magnetic cures are based, the fluid running from the operator's fingers into the body of the patient treated. That this fluidic energy is present in any human body may be proven in a number of ways. In the first place, the human aura, which I described in an earlier chapter, is partly a manifestation of this vital activity, the colors being the varying vibratory counterparts of the energy radiated. In psychometry, again, it is this vital energy which passes into objects, impregnating them with its fluidic properties. Each individual has his own peculiarly constituted and personal vital magnetism, and this differs from all others in quality and properties. A fully developed psychic is enabled to distinguish these, one from another, and a medium in a trance may be enabled to get into communication with a deceased person through or by means of this fluidic impression left upon it, as explained in the chapter devoted to trance. One or two practical examples or exercises may serve to show the student the reality of this fluidic emanation, and how he may employ these to convince his skeptical friends also of its reality. Experiment to prove the existence of the fluid. 1. A very simple test is the following. Hang a dead black cloth over the back of a chair, and see that no light falls directly on the cloth. The light in the room should be somewhat subdued, and you should stand between it and the cloth, so as to throw your hands, held against the latter, into shadow. Now approach your two hands one to the other, and touch the fingertips together, the hands being otherwise opened wide, palms turned toward yourself, and thumbs pointing toward the ceiling. In this condition you will probably find that as the first and fourth fingertips touch, the second and third have to be bent considerably to touch one another. The hand should be at a distance of about 3 inches from the black cloth, and about 15 inches from your face. Hold the fingertips together for about 30 seconds, then very gradually pull them apart, and you will see, coming from and joining your fingers, streams of whitish misty vapor, which is the fluid connection between the hands, which you have established by the previous contact. If you move the fingers slightly up and down after they have been separated an inch or so, you will find that the stream or bands of light followed the fingers, still connecting them, which will prove that this is not due to a hallucination or to what is called persistence of vision. How to magnetize water. 2. Place 2 glasses of water side by side on the table. Over one of these place the tips of your fingers, held together so as to form a point as much as possible. Hold these over the water in one glass for 4 or 5 minutes, willing that your vital magnetism should pass into the water and affect it. If now you ask a sensitive person who has not seen you perform the experiment to pick out the glass of water which has been treated magnetically, he will be able to do so almost invariably, and will tell you that the water sparkles as though charged with some effervescent gas. Life preserved by the human fluid. Some recent experiments conducted by a group of scientific men in Bordeaux, France, have proved conclusively that the human body radiates a form of vital energy which may be extremely powerful in its results. A lady possessing the power of projection or externalizing this vital energy in a remarkable degree, discovered that by placing her hands for 15 or 20 minutes daily for a period of 2 or 3 weeks over certain dead objects such as oysters, canary birds, fishes, and even larger animals such as guinea pigs and rabbits, she was enabled to preserve them indefinitely, that is, instead of decomposing as they ordinarily would have done, they dried up or mummified, and were preserved for months with no changes whatever taking place in their substance. They never decomposed. Proofs of the human fluid. This fact was fully endorsed by several chemists and physicians who studied her case, and they stated that this was due to the fact that the vital emanation coming from her body killed or destroyed the bacteria usually present in all these bodies after death. This could be traced with the microscope. For example, 6 oysters were allowed to decompose partially, while 6 were treated by her. The 6 that were treated never decomposed at all, but dried up or desiccated without any putrefaction. Now, when the other half-dozen oysters had partially decomposed, and bacteria could be seen under the microscope, Madame X was requested to place her hands over the oysters and treat them. After 15 minutes' treatment, they were again examined and found that thousands of bacteria had been killed. At the end of a few days they had all disappeared, and the oysters dried up, and thenceforward no decomposition whatever was noted. This is a very striking proof of the reality of the human fluid and its peculiar action in certain cases. There is evidence to show, however, that in other instances its action is different from this, and that it imparts life and energy rather than proves destructive, as in the above unique case. Many persons have the power of preserving the life of flowers by treating them with their hands in a similar manner every day, and the student might well try this experiment and to see what extent he can preserve the life of certain flowers. Others of a like nature being preserved at the same time by another person and under similar conditions to note the difference, if any, between the two sets. It is this vital magnetism which, projected beyond the bodily limits under the action of the will, is responsible for many physical phenomena, as we shall see in Chapter 38. How material objects become charged by the fluid. Material objects, particularly of a sponge-like nature, such as wood, are capable of being charged up very highly by this vital magnetism, and when this is the case they become en rapport with the medium, who is enabled to move or manipulate them from a distance by his power of will, because of this vital fluidic connection. We shall speak more fully of this, however, in the chapter devoted to physical phenomena. It may be proved experimentally also that this fluidic magnetism is either capable of sensing pain, or is the means whereby pain is carried from the nerve centres to the consciousness. Exteriorization of sensibility. Under certain conditions the fluidic body, which is the inner part of the physical body and acts as its double, may be hypnotic, and magnetic processes can be removed entirely from the physical body, in which case it may be set upon by the suggestion from others present at the time. For example, Colonel Albert de Rochas of Paris succeeded in entirely disengaging or separating the fluidic body of his subject from the physical body, and gradually removed it to greater and greater distances until it stood several feet from the entranced subject's physical organism. He then pricked the surface of the fluidic body with needles, and the sleeping subject experienced these sensations of pain in her own physical body at the spot or point exactly corresponding to the point picked on the etheric body. Repercussion. This seems to show that there is a direct vital or magnetic link between the etheric and the physical organisms, and that injury done to the one reacts upon the other by means of what is known as repercussion. This is a very significant fact when we remember that in materializing seances it sometimes happens that the figure is seized or in some way injured by the sitter, and that the entranced medium is injured in exactly the same way that the materialized figure is injured. This fact has long been known to experienced spiritualists. This curious fact also has great significance, and throws an interesting sidelight on many of the phenomena of so-called witchcraft. We know that many of these stories relate that the witch, assuming another form, visited other scenes or localities, and if cut, shot, or injured there, she herself was found the next day to have these exact injuries, though lying in her bed at some distance from the scene of the event in question. Such stories certainly appear more credible when we take into consideration the above facts, for both sets of phenomena seem to depend upon repercussion. How the human fluid may impress photographic plates. The human fluid may also be proved to exist by means of photography. If a sensitive plate be wrapped in black paper, and the hands of the psychic or medium of suitable temperament be placed upon it, the fluidic radiation coming from the hands and fingers will influence the plate through the enveloping black paper, and the impress of the hands will be found upon the plate. This can only be accounted for by supposing that the fingers became in some way radioactive during the experiment. Many psychics can go further than this, and can impress upon the plate an image or figure of their thought at the time. Thus, when holding the plate between their palms, or on their forehead, or against the solar plexus, and thinking of a sheep, a cat, a chair, etc., the image of a sheep, cat, or chair is impressed upon the plate. Experiments such as these may be tried by any student, and are of extreme interest and also of value scientifically when they are successful. It is to be hoped that many readers of this book will try experiments of this character and report any results they may obtain. End of chapter 25.
Chapter 26. Self-projection. By self-projection is meant the faculty or ability to send out or cause to travel to a distance the etheric self or double by an effort of will. This seems to be to some extent inherent in some individuals and occurs with them spontaneously and almost against their will. They go into trance, and at the end of a certain time find that they have left their bodies and traveled to some distant scene. This, however, is rare. In the majority of the cases the power has to be developed by long and assiduous cultivation. Of what the thought body is composed. Before I come to speak of this projection of the self, a few words are necessary as to the nature and composition of this etheric body, or double, which is thus projected. The physical body is composed of millions of tiny cells, and in each cell there is a center or nucleus of energy. This center is so infinitely small that it cannot be detected even by the highest powered microscope. All that we know is that physical matter in the cell is in some way vitalized or rendered living when it comes in contact with this vital center. The source of the energy is invisible and cannot be determined by us. It seems to well up from nowhere. Now, this center of energy constitutes a sort of psychic point or cell of its own, and as there are millions of them in the body, corresponding to the number of physical cells, it is obvious that there are millions of vital cells which conform exactly to the shape of the body, since they correspond to its physical cells in life. These psychic centers have been called psychomeres, and their bulk is estimated at about 1/1,000,000th that of the physical body. The density of etheric double therefore would be about 1/1,000,000th as dense as the physical body. The combined weight of these psychomeres has been variously estimated, but probably varies between that of the 10 postage stamps and 1.5 ounces. This would represent the weight of the astral or etheric body, and is such that it would float slowly upward through the physical atmosphere as would a balloon. This fact coincides with what we know of the gradual floating upward of the spiritual body after death. Inner finer bodies. It is this body which we inhabit after we discard the denser physical frame. It is not necessary to suppose that our consciousness is scattered throughout the whole of this body any more than it is at present. The center of spiritual activity and the power of the will and mind may be a point of force, so to speak, within this etheric double, and we may utilize and animate it just as we utilize and animate the physical body in this life. After a time it is probable that we discard this etheric body, to assume one of even lesser density, and that this process continues a number of times until the spirit ultimately inhabits one of such infinitely fine matter, if such it can be called, that it is practically a mental or spiritual body. This is what we learn from many spirits who have communicated such facts to us. It is this body, therefore, which becomes disengaged from the physical body during life and goes on trips or excursions, carrying with it the consciousness of the individual, and returns to animate the physical body at the end of a certain period of time. Possible dangers and how they are overcome. When this disunion or severance takes place, there is always a connecting link, a magnetic cord, which unites the physical and the etheric bodies. If this cord were to get broken for any reason, reanimation would be impossible, and the death of the body would take place. This is the great danger attendant upon experiments of this character, but such a phenomena is only possible in cases of very deep trance, where the separation is almost complete, and very little serves to disconnect it entirely. It is highly improbable that any but the most advanced student could reach this stage, and when he has reached it, certain mystical inner practices may be resorted to, which would offset this possible danger. It is this body which is occasionally photographed, and many so-called spirit photographs are in reality photographs, not of discarnate but of incarnate spirits. That is, they are wandering doubles of spirits still in the flesh. Again, many apparitions and figures seen in haunted houses are of this nature. They constitute the projections of living persons rather than those who have passed over, and it takes an experienced psychic student to distinguish between the two types of figures. They have been known to appear at seances, also in the form of materializations. In addition to these etheric bodies or doubles, there may also be mental or thought bodies, created entirely by the mind and the will of the subject. Thus, in a case known to us, a clairvoyant was sent on a trip to the house of a friend and asked to describe the individual whom she found there. She described a certain person in detail, hair, eyes, features, etc., given at great length. When the psychic had finished and recovered full consciousness, she was told that her description was entirely wrong, and that no such person existed in the house in question, and her description was throughout erroneous. In order to prove this, a journey was made at once to the house of the subject in question. When the facts were stated, he replied that although he himself did not in any way resemble the clairvoyant description, this corresponded exactly and in 1 minute detail to a character he was creating and writing about in his book. In other words, his thoughts had created the figure so vividly that it actually lived for the time being as an objective entity, and was seen as such by the entranced clairvoyant. We can see from this, then, that thoughts are things. They assume shape, and, in a certain sense, live in the physical world. All our thoughts have a definite shape as well as a definite color, and the more advanced students along the path of development can see and describe these thoughts, we are told, as clearly as we see objects. How the selves may be projected. If this may be true, it has a very significant bearing upon cases which occur and have been reported in the past. For example, the reader will doubtless recall the case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson, a most important case for all students to study. Here, as we know, the original individual finally became two. Dr. Jekyll developed another self, calling himself Mr. Hyde. Dr. Jekyll was kindly, helpful, and sympathetic. Hyde was evil, malicious, and wholly repulsive. These two selves were developed in the original person, and the split between them became greater and greater as the months went by. Finally Mr. Hyde assumed complete supremacy, and Dr. Jekyll vanished forever. In this case it was not a mere change of personality which could be accounted for on any psychological grounds. It was an actual physical transformation. Apparently there were two separate bodies, which were transformed one into the other. Suppose now that the good self, Dr. Jekyll, also the bad self, Mr. Hyde, existing as separate mental beings, each had the power of self-projection. They would each create by their own thoughts a separate body, and this being would resemble in outward appearance the thoughts which created it. Cases of this character might, therefore, exist and might conceivably be explained on scientific principles. We must be careful, then, of the character of the thought self which we build up. For if this resembles outwardly its inner structure, we may, many of us, come to resemble monstrosities rather than human beings, at some stage of our development when the plane is reached where thoughts predominate and shape the expression of the self. This idea has been graphically portrayed in John Uri Lloyd's book, Etidorfa. This inner etheric body, which is expelled to a distance by the power of will, in cases of self-projection, may be released and projected by the student after a certain amount of practice. He should go about this cautiously, feeling his way as if it were but proceeding more or less along the following lines. Place yourself in a perfectly composed attitude, either on a couch or in a large chair. Close the eyes and breathe deeply for a few minutes, all the time holding the mind on a central point of concentration. Travel over your body in thought, and at each point or spot dwelt upon by you, will that your etheric body becomes detached or loosened from its connection with the physical body. As you begin to gain control of this process, you may hear or rather sense a process of separation taking place, resembling a click and inwardly feeling like the disconnection of an electric current. When this has been completed at one point, travel to another. Do not try too many on any one occasion, and always be sure to restore by an effort of will the original connected condition before you terminate the experiment. Further directions and advice. After you have gone round your body in this way, and have succeeded in disconnecting it more or less completely, you should then call up before you in space a certain distant locality, such as the room of a friend, and throwing the whole force of your being into a single determined effort of will, force yourself mentally to leave your body and travel to the locality before you. If you feel that you are losing consciousness, or that everything is going black before you, discontinue the experiment at once and return to your physical body. If you can keep your self-consciousness active, you may safely travel to any distance, feeling assured that you will be able to return whenever you want to and reanimate your own physical frame. All this, of course, takes time and persistence of development and cannot be acquired in a few days. Moreover, I would advise the student not to attempt this process until he was progressed further in his studies and read the advice contained in the last chapter. Should he, however, make up his mind to do so, he should proceed along the above lines, advancing cautiously all the time and never allowing himself to lose consciousness at any stage of the proceedings. When he has acquired this power he will have in his possession a wonderful knowledge and a means of acquiring information and spiritual insight which others, who have not developed it, are totally unable to comprehend. End of chapter 26.
Chapter 27 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Recording by Nissa Schmidt. Chapter 27 Apparitions. An apparition is a phantasmal being, commonly called a ghost, which is seen by sensitive individuals under certain conditions. Before we can speak more fully of apparitions, we must answer the question which naturally occurs, namely, what is a ghost? Modern theories and ideas on this question have changed greatly within the past quarter of a century. At that time, if an ordinary scientific man were questioned on this subject, he would probably reply that it was a hallucination, the result of a diseased mind, and had no existence in reality outside the imagination of the subject who perceived it. But in these days this idea has been greatly modified, and it must now be admitted that ghosts are very much more complicated than this. In the first place, when the Society for Psychical Research began its investigations in 1882, it was found that a large percentage of cases of apparitions occurred at or about the time of death. Some occurred before and some after, but most of them were approximately at that time. Further, the subjects who perceived or saw them were not diseased or imaginative persons, and probably never had another experience of this character either before or afterwards. The questions naturally arose: why this connection? What is the bond uniting the dying person with the apparition seen? Some scientific men, it is true, have come forward and stated that this connection is due to chance, and that there was no real connection whatever. This is, however, disproved by the report of the Society, as the result of several years' work. They succeeded in obtaining answers from some 30,000 persons, and calculating the percentage of possible coincidences, they found the number of coincidences was hundreds of times more numerous than chance could account for. Professor Sidgwick's committee, who conducted the investigation, therefore signed the following statement: Apparitions coinciding with death. Between deaths and apparitions of the dying person a connection exists which is not due to chance alone. This we hold as a proved fact. There is, therefore, some definite connection between the two, and the task was to ascertain its nature and character. The theory was then advanced that, inasmuch as telepathy is a fact scientifically proved, and inasmuch as figures and images may be transferred from one mind to another by this means, the dying person might transfer a vision or image of himself to the mind of some friend or relative, so that this person would see, not a real outstanding figure, but a mental picture or image of him, created by the thought of the dying person and conveyed telepathically to the mind of the living friend. These telepathic hallucinations, as they are called, doubtless account for many of the apparitions which are seen at or about the moment of death; also for many of those which occur before death and during the lifetime of the individual. But how about those which occur after death? Here we should have to assume that some other process was involved, or else extend our belief so as to cover and embrace the action of discarnate spirits. Phantasms of the dead. One theory of these apparitions, seen after the death of the person they represent, is that they embody the thought of the dead person. For example, an individual spirit may continue to think over its life and the scenes of its varied activities,
and these recollections and thoughts influencing the minds of those still living by means of telepathy would cause them to see the phantasmal image of the person thinking the thoughts. This, however, is a question which we shall discuss more fully in the next chapter. For the present, it may be said that this is one theory advanced to explain so-called phantasms of the dead, or ghosts, as opposed to phantasms of the living and phantasms of the dying. Ghosts that touch. There are many cases of apparitions, however, which cannot be thus easily explained by assuming that they are the projection or telepathic influence of a living mind, or the mind of a discarnate spirit. In many cases they seem to be real substantial beings, to occupy space and exist as real semi-solid or material phantoms. Those who have been convinced of the reality of an etheric or spiritual body need have no difficulty in assuming that it is this body which is seen at such times, and in many cases we find strong evidence for supposing that a body of this character actually exists. For example, in one historic instance, a doctor and his wife both saw the figure of a woman standing at the foot of their bed, and saw it cross the room and place its fingers over a small nightlight which was burning on the mantelpiece. At the moment the phantom thus placed his hands over the light, it was extinguished, and the room was left in darkness. Here it is difficult to suppose that any thought creation or telepathic hallucination of any character existed, for the reason that a physical phenomenon was produced, and no hallucination could have done this. Materialized phantoms. Again, in many cases, the phantasmal form or apparition is seen to open doors, lift curtains, raise bedclothes, etc. And in such cases, again, we must assume that a real phantom exists. The problem is thus more complicated than at first appears, and as Mr. Andrew Lang remarked, consequently, if these stories are true, some apparitions are ghosts, real objective entities filling space. Hallucinations cannot draw curtains, or open doors, or cause thumps. Not real thumps. Hallucinatory thumps are different. Dr. Burns tells of a gentleman who, in a dream, pushed against a door in a distant house, so that those in the room were scarcely able to resist the pressure. Now, if this rather staggering anecdote be true, the spirit of a living man, being able to affect matter, is also, so to speak, material, and is an actual entity, an astral body. These arguments then make in favor of the old-fashioned theory of ghosts and wraiths, as things objectively existing, rather than the view that all these "ghosts" are necessarily subjective in origin. Phantasms created by thought. These phantasms are doubtless thought bodies, in many cases constructed by the operating intelligence itself. One interesting fact in this connection is this, that it is nearly always stated by those who have seen figures of this kind that the phantom is clear and plainly visible about the head and the upper part of the body, but that the apparition dwindles down to a vaporous film toward the feet. In other words, the upper part of the body is much clearer than the lower part. If the phantom were a definite thought creation, this is only what we should expect, for we think of the upper portion of our bodies much more than the lower portion. We are more conscious of our head and shoulders, and the upper portion of the trunk, and the hands and arms, and only vaguely conscious of the legs and lower portions of the body. This is exactly what we find in apparitions, and it would therefore seem that the figures are clear in outline just to the extent that the operating intelligence is intensely conscious of the appearance of the body he is creating or building up. Phantoms which impart information. There are also certain cases on record in which the phantom has given the recipient of the experience some important information, which he did not know previously, where certain papers are hidden, etc. Such cases certainly prove that an independent intelligence is there, a spirit which is thus manifesting its presence. It must be admitted, however, that most apparitions are purposeless and meaningless, but this is easily accounted for by supposing that we see, at such times, not the spirit itself, but its mere projected thought, a phantom created by the spirit, rather than the spirit itself. Most apparitions are, doubtless, of this nature. We have seen that there are apparitions of the living, of the dying, and of the dead, mostly attached to human beings. When they are attached to localities, they become local phantoms or cases of haunting, of which we shall speak in the next chapter. Experimental apparitions. In addition to these, there are so-called cases of experimental apparitions, in which an individual succeeds in creating a phantasmal figure at a distance by an effort of will or thought. These closely resemble certain cases of self-projection on the one hand, and cases of witchcraft on the other, and form an intermediary between them, since on the one hand they are mere mental pictures, and on the other they are real physical entities. Experimental apparitions, then, seem to bridge the gulf between these two types of phenomena, and form a connecting link. Apparitions may be induced experimentally by willing very strongly, just as you are falling asleep, that you will appear to a certain person at a certain time, and, if this is properly managed, it will be successful in a large number of cases. This may also be induced experimentally by means of hypnotic suggestion, or magnetic or mesmeric processes, and when in the trance, the spirit of the sleeper may be directed to a certain locality and there seen by those present. The natives of West Africa claim to be able to do this more or less at will. They can project the double or etheric body, and so to speak, materialize at the other end. How to create thought forms. The same laws which prevail in many of the previous exercises also rule here. The student should see to it that he retains a grasp of his own personality and does not lose control of his inner self at any stage of the proceedings. As he progresses in his development along these lines, he should endeavor to make the apparition which appears at the other end of the line, so to speak, more or less solid. After he has once succeeded in the process of projection, he should throw all his will into the effort to make the projected form more and more substantial, and to will that his self-consciousness and activity be actually transferred to the distant scene.